You are about to opt in to Monerotopia, a show for the Monero community where all are welcome to join. From noob to maxi, no matter what bags you hold. Just sit back and relax to the sweet sounds of Monero's latest progress. Or if you're feeling inspired, join us on stage. Remember, the only thing that can stop Monero is a false belief that it can be stopped. And if you want to win the revolution faster, we recommend you remove your XMR from all custodial exchanges immediately. Warning, voting accidents are common around here. Don't forget to properly secure your private keys. Monerotopia starts now.
Alrighty, GM.
What's up, everybody?
Everybody.
What's up? Where's Tux? I miss Tux and his GMs. What's he up to? I don't know.
We got to get some young guys on the show. Tux, come back, brother. You're the only. There's just a bunch of old guys here talking about old guy stuff.
He's probably battening down the hatches and working on Cake Wallet.
Shortwave's a young guy. Shortwave, how old are you? I mean, I guess you don't need to tell us, but are you a young guy or an old guy?
Rather young.
Rather young. That's
Zoomer.
what I'd go with.
No, millennial.
Oh, yeah.
That's
You gotta be on the trailing edge of millennial to still call yourself young.
Yeah, definitely a trailing edge.
All right.
We had some young blood at Monerotopia. We had some young blood hanging out. It was good. The Pegasus team, they're a bunch of young guys. I was impressed by them, and they're very excited about Monero. What's going on, guys? I know the world is perpetually falling apart, as usual.
God, man. It's just fucking clown pilled over here. It's like, I guess Alaska said it last week, clown pilled.
Yeah,
Yes.
just watching the world burn. It's like, Jesus.
Like, it's going to be illegal to have an operating system that isn't totally pwned, and they're going to make sure the price of oil is high. And I guess we're now all Israelis, but without any of the Israeli rights.
What's the illegal to run and operate? Oh, they're trying to like KYC when people.
What
Yeah,
they've done is put legislation where they're trying to pass legislation in California, Colorado, New York, and I think they already passed it in Brazil that will require operating systems, including open source ones like Linux, to place age verification deep into the kernel. I'm sure that's got to be in the news stories.
I didn't. No, I don't think I had it. I saw it this week. I don't think I grabbed the link.
Okay.
It's like concrete. It's actually happening. I thought it was some kind of like far
think
fetched.
No, I think in Brazil that they already. It sounds like
Holy shit.
it's like 2 weeks in Brazil for the law to take effect. Right now, it's just in the legislatures of California, Colorado, New York, and I don't know. Maybe some other states have joined by now. But I mean, California and New York are already pretty huge states.
I mean, thank God it's Linux and it's open source. So there's going to be people that are just going to strip that out and release the systems without that stuff in it.
Yeah, like how would they do this to open source tech?
No, that's a great question, actually. How can you do that as an open source system? And what are you going to do with all those servers that are running in California? Now you have to age verify all of them. I mean, it's a nightmare. Like, I don't think the devs are even clear about how they could implement such a thing.
Yeah, I mean that's like trying to say they want to implement KYC into Monero on the protocol level, right? Isn't that like equivalent? They're forcing developers to add.
And then we've got
to open source code.
I mean, and technically, if code is speech, then that's coercive.
Yeah.
That's coercive.
Yeah, they're forcing
coercive speech
speech
by the feds.
Yeah, I mean it's crossing all sorts of lines. I don't even. That's crazy. Has there ever been anything like that done to date?
No,
right?
No, not even. I mean, I guess maybe PGP encryption back in the 90s. Maybe that's something kind of close, but no, something this invasive, I don't think has been done to open source for decades.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, even with PGP, yeah, they weren't compelling them to change the PGP code, right? They were just, they tried to just make it illegal to use. Crazy. All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few vectors that they could go here. They might, like Linux or people that distribute like the various organizations that distribute distributions. Maybe they could just pull out of California and say, all right, California IPs are not allowed to download. And then obviously everyone in California just uses a VPN to get their to download their operating system. So I guess there's that. The one of the things that's kind of disturbing is that Canonical and I think by proxy Ubuntu, don't quote me on the Ubuntu one, but at least Canonical, they are quote unquote reviewing it with their legal team. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? This should take you about all of 1 hour to review. This is a First Amendment challenge. It's an obvious challenge. So there's nothing to review. Say, fuck no, we're not going to comply with this. We're going to go to court and we're going to band together as an ecosystem and we're all going to go to court. You know, like, you know, I don't know, GNOME, Fedora, Canonical, Red Hat, whoever else, like just the whole, like there's more than enough money in that ecosystem. There's hundreds of millions of dollars in the Linux ecosystem, probably billions really. So the fact, like, I don't know, like a lot of people are raising an eyebrow at Canonical right now saying, wait a second, what do you mean you're reviewing this? Like, this isn't a question. Easy, obvious challenge. So.
Well, what would be the cypherpunk solution to this, right? I mean, it can't be that we're ever even putting these scenarios where this can happen, right? We need some technical solution that doesn't allow this to happen, which I thought open source already solved, but I guess not.
Hypothetically, I guess that's what GitHub was supposed to be until Microsoft bought it. But there are other ways to do Git. They're just not super popular. Like there are federated ways, more decentralized ways to manage your Git repos.
Well, and as I said, since this is open source, if Canonical is stupid enough to actually release age verification in the system, somebody's just going to fork it, remove that, and then release it anyway.
Yeah.
I guess practically speaking, though, the things that the version that most people will be using will be the cucked one, right? Just because it'll be the one that's easier to access and be the one that's already being installed and everything, right?
You know, that might be what they're counting on. Like there's a very real possibility that they're counting on that. Linux it's not hard, right? If you spend a little bit of time like playing with it, but neither is it just like super easy to get everything, you know, installed and running. I mean, especially if you're coming from Windows or Mac, you've got to sort of like switch your mindset and learn a little bit of tech stuff. But I feel like over the years, especially since about 2014, it seems that they have almost intentionally made things slightly more difficult at every step, just like the littlest fucking things. Again, it's not difficult. It's just that if you don't know what you're doing, those little things add up and make it more difficult for a pleb. So they're like, I don't know, just install Ubuntu. I guess it has age verification. No, whatever, you know, it's fine. Like they're probably counting on a lot of people doing that.
Yeah, that would be my guess, because like the official Ubuntu is going to have age verification and KYC and shit like that in it, and the cypherpunk ones are not, and they're just relying on Ubuntu being a big enough name that, okay, most people are going to go download this even though it's cucked.
Crazy. And you said New York is one of the places that's proposing this?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't even see that. I did see that they're proposing legislation to basically make it illegal for AI to be used for professional service, like legal advice or medical advice. Yeah. Which
that one's funny. That one's interesting.
I mean, honestly, you just got to get out of New York. Like,
that's just all the professional service lobbies, like the licensing lobbies trying to,
exactly. The fucking Pharisees have to keep their job, obviously. I mean, who else is going to take care of the scribbles?
At what point at what point are you just going to say to hell with it and leave? Like, you just got to vote with your feet at one point. Like, you can't vote with your voice. You can't vote with a ballot. You just got to pick up and leave.
The thing is, I can't, I have my family here, so it's like, I can leave, but it's like, all right, what did I achieve? I abandoned my family. It's like, I got to stay here and fight, man. It's not happening. It's not happening.
Fighting. Give them a pinprick to the heart, bro.
It's a good problem to have. I have family. There are people in the position that can pick up and leave. There's a lot of people like that.
I don't know. Move to New Jersey. No, I'm just playing.
Dirty Joes.
I mean, you joke, but that might actually be a serious option if it comes right down to it.
Yeah, it's all the same. Jersey. Well, Jersey's a little better. Connecticut is pretty much the same as New York in terms of the laws. They follow New York. Jersey's a little better, I guess. Obviously, Florida is the place to be if you're trying to stay in the States. I guess Texas. Florida seems to be the real front runner now in terms of getting some slice of liberty, freedom.
Yeah,
But
it's a little expensive, but
yeah.
it's nice. Good, nice weather.
New Hampshire.
Nice
Right near
weather.
the beach, man.
Yep. All right. Yeah. So let's we'll do the price report. No special guests today, guys. Anybody that wants to be a Monerotopia special guest, reach out. Best probably if you email us so that we can keep track of it. Monerotopia@protonmail.com. Monerotopia@protonmail.com. If you ever want to jump up, shill whatever it is that you're working on, if it's Monero related, whatever it may be, you know the theme of this show. As long as it fits within the theme of Monerotopia, we're always welcoming to new people, especially people that want to grow their Monero project, bring attention to whatever it is they may be working on. That's what this platform is for. Yeah, reach out, Monerotopia@protonmail.com. I just didn't have the time this week to grab a special guest. Simple X guy, he wanted to jump on, but I'm going to save him for another day so we can make it a better show. A couple other people I'm talking to, but yeah, nobody concrete for today. If you want to be today's special guest, maybe we allow you to do that. I don't know. Send me a DM during the show or just jump up. But yeah, we'll do price report. I think we have Tony. He'll come up and do the news. And yeah, then we'll do viewers on stage.
Hey,
so let's get
whichever Scrooge McDuck in the background is counting their. It sounds like someone's counting their gold coins.
That's me, bro.
I was going to say it's either silver or gold, one of the two.
Okay.
I bought these off Alaska.
Oh, okay. I love the sound of it. Actually, the sound of silver and metal coins like clinking together is really nice.
I know. I was just daydreaming of how it would have been funny if, thinking about how, if I was a real silver collector. There must be there's a nice rush to that, right? As opposed to Monero. There's no way to really enjoy your Monero physically.
Let's see. K Fourth says that you're counting your shillings.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I should have called them shillings and brass farthings.
Shillings.
I actually gave my niece years ago some silver coins, and I don't want to tell her. I don't want to tell her how much it's gone up, so that she's like, I don't know, I'm gonna buy some concert tickets or something.
Can you just imagine? I mean, it'd be kind of cool to just have like a whole table stacked with silver coins, right?
Bro, back in the day, late 1800s.
Yeah, when money was money. All right, let me run. Now I know what you're saying, Shirtwave. I can't even find them, and let me run the price report. We really got to put these in order. Here we go.
The Monerotopia Price Report segment is sponsored by Exelix, privacy-first multi-chain swap aggregator designed for seamless instant swaps. Exchange XMR instantly with the fully non-custodial, KYC-free experience and secure execution across hundreds of blockchains.
All right.
Welcome to the price report. I got my screen sharing, so I think.
Oh, here it is. Okay.
There we go. All right. We'll start with Monero.
Full screen. Yeah, definitely a big week for price. I mean, it really does feel like things are teetering on. Obviously, you'll go into all this body, but it really does feel like things are teetering on the edge with crypto. Whether we go further down, there's another leg down, or whether the bottom is in. I don't know. I mean, it does feel bottomish just because there's so much negative sentiment out there, and crypto appears to be holding up pretty well. I know it went down yesterday with the broader market, but just anecdotally, it does feel like it's kind of holding up better than I would expect given the turmoil that's happening. But yeah, man, take it away.
Yeah, I guess I disagree. Right? It's all. I'm not really super convinced about it, but it would be hard for me to believe that crypto has bottomed. There might be like an interim bottom here. In fact, it almost looks like a new flag is forming on Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean the markets are. It's weird. Like even COVID was actually like a normal market cycle almost. Like they printed a shitload of M2, but everything else about it was basically normal. There was some big fucking reason why, oh my God, you know, the emergency, and then they did the money printing and they lowered the rates, and then the markets did what they were supposed to, and we hit targets that made a lot of sense, and all the patterns worked out. But the last year of prices, like crypto, just everything, like everything seems more fake and gay than it ever has before. Things like the patterns have sort of changed. And while I think on a macro sense, if we're looking for like a macro crash or whatever, which we're not right now, but if we were, I think all of those patterns basically also have to stay the same. But in the interim, like everything else in between, right? The top and the bottom, everything else in between just, it feels, maybe I'm just not in the charts enough these days, right? Maybe my head just isn't like glued to the screen like it used to be, but things just don't feel the same. Like things feel fundamentally different. You know, we've talked about the gold price. The way that gold is behaving is fundamentally different, and you can see it when you do things like compare gold to oil or put statistical metrics onto the gold chart, and you can just say, man, it's like fundamentally the world looks very different, and that must be driving the kinds of differences, because it does seem like, you know, there's a huge divergence between the past 30 years of market behavior and what we're seeing now, at least intuitively. But okay, let's start with Monero. Let's go to the daily. We had a little bit of gains this week. It's nice. You would almost call this a rising wedge, right? We could probably like draw some line down here. You know, we could find a way. We could find a way to make this pattern say what we want it to say. I guess you also might be able to try and call this some kind of a rising wedge or a bear flag. Hypothetically, potentially, it could be a bear flag. Still, though, even if even if this was a bear flag, I kind of feel like there's a reasonably good chance. Excuse me. There's a reasonably good chance that something like maybe 250 could be the bottom, or you know, that we might have already bottomed for this bear market cycle, right? Remember last bear market, Monero outperformed Bitcoin and the rest of the market significantly. So, and it's interesting because Monero versus Bitcoin is already at a reasonably high spot. I mean, you know, sort of accepting that temporary spike on the supposed hack that happened. You know, Monero versus Bitcoin is actually still at reasonably good levels. Maybe I guess good is a relative term, but you know, reasonably good compared to where we were for the past couple of years. So, if Monero does do better this bear market, then you know we could reasonably end up somewhere at that 0.01 level, or the 1% of Bitcoin's market cap level, or Bitcoin's price. You know, that I hate to say it, but that's also like having this as your sort of bear market target for the ratio. Like that would be a very reasonable target historically in terms of where bear markets have peaked out just before the bull market began, which always sees, you know, Bitcoin and crypto in general outperforming Monero because of obviously the fraud. They just like they do the fraud pumps, and they got their mechanisms. They have their ways and means to do that. So what I'm getting at here is that hypothetically, if the patterns continue as they used to, maybe, you know, maybe sometime in the summer, maybe October, maybe September, Monero, you know, hits that 0.01 level, and that'd be a pretty obvious spot actually to look for the bottom in crypto. And if you're a trader, you might actually move some Monero into crypto, and then look for a fall of the ratio. That would just be identical to the kinds of patterns we've seen. And I have to believe, you know, I mean, the government still hates Monero, right? Like that hasn't changed. So they're going to play the same tricks, and I don't see any reason. I don't see any fundamental change for why they couldn't play the same tricks that they have played for the past few years with Monero relative to the rest of crypto. There is an interesting development that we should talk about regarding Kraken. So years ago, Kraken submitted an application to the Federal Reserve for a master account with the Federal Reserve. Basically, it's what all the regular banks have. They're able to hold reserves at the Federal Reserve, and do overnight transfers, overnight settlements, stuff like that. And basically it's an official. It's one of the more official things that you could think of, like being a quote unquote bank, like being truly integrated into the banking system. And Kraken somehow managed to do that with Monero listed the entire time. And they didn't have to cave to regulator pressure. They were able to keep it there. So Brian Armstrong and Barry Silbert, I guess he's not an exchange owner, but the Gemini brothers, and whoever's running Binance these days, all of you are fucking scumbags. I am now, I think we all suspected this for a long time, but the reality is that it's very possible that they just invented out of whole cloth this backroom regulator pressure. Because if that really was the case, that they couldn't list Monero because of some fucking backroom regulator pressure, then Kraken would have had to delist Monero before getting on to the Federal Reserve master account. So I don't think I believe those guys. I don't think anyone believed them. I think they were just full of shit the entire time. I think their financial interests lie somewhere else outside of having Monero listed. And I think we all know what that financial interest is, a la Zcash. I think we all know that there's some scumbaggery happening here with Zcash. Actually, it's funny. I look at the Zcash chart and I say to myself, this is a horrible fucking chart. And realistically, this should have broken down by now. Like the pattern, and it did. Like, I mean, obviously, like there was some level of breakdown. But this recent action right here is all down to the negative. But these kinds of patterns, especially when you end up down here on the underside of this lower standard deviation level, this usually spells significant pullback. And when you have a chart that pumped as exponentially as Zcash did, this thing should be on its way to round tripping. And okay, I guess you could say it's kind of on its way to round tripping, but probably at a minimum, we're at least going to see the $130, $140 level for Zcash by the time the bull market is over. This looks to me suspiciously, and we talked about this last week, this looks suspiciously like a chart that they're trying to prop up. So of course they are right. That makes sense. There's some kind of financial interest in here. There's probably even some intel agency interest in here. Like there's just too many red flags when it comes to this coin. We don't know necessarily what's going on, but again, guys, like in lieu of reviewing the cryptography and the code myself and becoming a fucking, decade-long expert to figure that shit out, a lot of times you can just look at simple things like heuristics, which is kind of what the Monero community in aggregate did regarding Zcash, which is why we have our suspicions regarding this coin. But anyways, it does look to me like the insider cabal of crypto probably wants to keep this coin propped up to the greatest extent that they can. They are probably going to try and rally this thing if and when the next bull market kicks off. They're probably not willing to waste too much money supporting it, but they're going to waste some money supporting it. So anyways, if we have further to go downside in crypto in general, Zcash is definitely going with it. There is no doubt about that. And you might, if you're a player, right, if you're trying to play that trading game, you might start picking up Zcash right around the 130 level. Maybe like scale in starting at, say, I don't know, 140. Scale in from like 140 to like 100. That could be a reasonable play there. Anyways, so let's wrap up Monero here. Let's check the divergences. There's really nothing here to see on the divergences anymore. I feel like at some point, they probably, except for fucking Poloniex, they probably got wind, and this probably happened years ago. We saw actually when we started publishing this chart and people became aware of it, that's actually when the divergences started reducing significantly. Now, the way that I measure this isn't perfect. It's not second by second. TradingView doesn't afford me that kind of capacity, or afford anyone that kind of capacity for that matter. I would need to run my own charts and my own analysis. And it's on my to-do list, guys. There's a lot of stuff I would like to do, in terms of analysis that, I'll get to it one day. I've got, other projects that is not just price. That I'm working on. So anyways, that's Monero here. Let's see if we can make some prediction. I don't know. Let's try and make a prediction. What do we think price is going to do for Monero? I don't know, guys. Flat to up. The one good thing about this chart that I do like is the fact that we're now on the upper side of the lower standard deviation bands, right? So these orange bands right here. Monero's price is now on the upper side of that. I'm honestly not sure how important that is at this precise moment, right? I don't want to drink my own Kool-Aid, as they say, or sniff my own farts when it comes to using one style of analysis. But if we see Monero moving up quickly sometime here, like just say between now and Tuesday, there's a good chance that Monero actually will really want to try and shoot for that $400 level. But we do need to see some positive action, because falling back inside of these orange bands here, right? If price instead does this, it's not really the best, strongest sign, right? You really want to see a quick rebound off of this lower level here, off of this sort of what should now be somewhat of a support. So even right now, like the price, I feel like should have gone up a little bit more already, but I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I want to see this thing move towards the upside here in the next like 1 or 2 days. It's totally plausible that Monero could have a nice little bounce here, back up to 420, our drug price for the drug coin. No, I'm just playing. All right. So that's what Monero looks like. Someone asked me to take a look at Firo or Firo. I don't know how to pronounce that. We should ask the guys. Someone tell me, please. Someone tell me if it's Fire O or if it's Firo. Firo sounds like it rolls off the tongue better to me. Okay, so let's see. What are we looking at here? You're looking at potential support coming up. This is, what are we on, the daily? Yeah, so this is a reasonably good support area. Let's take a look. Let's go back further. Zoom. I think, yeah, this chart has a kind of like a consistently negative. Yeah, this isn't like a very good chart on a long-term scale. And why would it be, right? Like, over long terms, to support price, you need organic usage, or you need the insider cabal that prints money propping up your price. You need one of those two things. Now, Monero doesn't have the latter, but it has the former, which is why it actually continues to perform. All the other coins out there have been leveraged to all hell, right? They've been front run, and all of the gains that those coins could possibly make from organic usage that might happen in the future has already been extracted, right? So like there's, and it's like Litecoin, right? People use Litecoin to make movements to get in and out of stuff, but I don't think anyone's really on the Litecoin number go up bandwagon. I don't see anyone on that narrative except for a few of the Litecoin bros, but whereas there's a lot of people on the just use Monero, like just save money in Monero. Yes, it's going to go up eventually because it's used, right? Like that's such a strong, powerful, lasting capacity. Oops, what did I do? That's such a strong, lasting. I don't want to call it a narrative. It's more like a reality. Like, yes, it's also a narrative. Everything is a narrative, but it's also just the truth. So, anyways, back to Firo. I'm not really sure that I could say that there's a whole lot of organic usage that could sustain this chart, and that makes sense if you look at what it's done for the past 6 years. This is a continuous down chart. You should not be surprised if this coin does continue, kind of, moving towards the downside, right? Unless something gets released, unless people really start using it. So hopefully that answers your question, Francis Van Quixote 300. Don't attack any windmills. Okay. Xano also not looking so great. Not looking hot here for Xano. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm kind of like, this is kind of an intuitive feels thing, but you can sort of see it, right? Like, so here's the horizontal significance. That was the first place, right? On its first big pump. This is where it hit. Got a couple, this little W bottoming pattern here. This doesn't look good, right? There's nothing but air below this chart. Maybe we go to the 4 hour. Can we find any reason to be positive on this chart? I don't think that we can. Yeah, I mean, everything here is on the underside. Yeah, so sorry, Roger. Like, I hope you already sold your bags or some of them, because this coin doesn't look so hot right now. All right, so that's Xano. We got Pirate Chain. Pirate Chain also kind of doing what everyone else is doing. Pirate Chain has the weirdest like signature of just these massive. Pirate Chain takes the elevator up and down. I don't know how they manage to do that, right? Usually you take the stairs up and the elevator down, or the elevator up and the stairs down, but they seem to. I guess these are kind of stairs, so maybe I'm just exaggerating. Yeah, I don't know. I can't see this coin holding on either here. If, again, that's why we talk about the general, more broad picture. If we're talking about Bitcoin and crypto, whatever, has another leg down here at some point, maybe it's a couple months from now, right? But if and when there is another down leg for crypto, it's hard to imagine any of these coins really holding on to the levels that they have. They're going to crash to something much lower, in which case Pirate Chain would be another 50% down. So I hope that you guys didn't buy these peaks up here. I hope you didn't catch the FOMO. Hopefully you guys watch the show and get that sense, right? Get that intuition to not buy into FOMO. All right, Cubic also kind of lulls, not really much to talk about there. And I guess we're all going to lose everything on Minotari unless Fluffy Pony manages to do something right away. I don't know, bro. What can I say? Well, that's what I said. Not all of these coins are going to work out, right? That's why you throw spaghetti at the wall, as they say. Like, you're just, hey, throw, maybe you've got, I don't know, a couple 100,000 net worth. You throw a couple thousand, like 1% at Tari, and you're like, all right, if I lose everything, and okay, I lost on Tari. But one of those coins that you do that
I don't know if you saw Body Star jump in, but
please.
Fluffy announced this week that he's stepping back from doing anything crypto related right now. Any work.
Oh, he did say that. That's right.
Yeah, just for like personal reasons. Included Tari as well. So I don't think he's going to be pulling any moves anytime soon.
Maybe he's playing some 4D chess and he's just saying that he's going into the background.
Maybe.
Yeah, see, I have a bag of Tari, but it's definitely less than 1% of my total net worth, so I'm okay with losing it.
We could say MMFA, make Monero fluffy again. No, I'm just playing. All right. All right, let's take a look at the hash rate, which is it's down a little bit, but that's to be expected. This is really not too bad at all, considering that we're in a bear market. I don't know. Is Monero really in a bear market? I just don't believe that spike that happened. The 800 spike for like a week. Like, in my mind, that's hard to count for fucking anything. It's like there's kind of this like, oh, but what if, right? What if I had sold my Monero bags at 800 and I had rebought at 200? Okay, like, yeah. I don't know, like, what if the Tooth Fairy was real and gave you $1 million or something? Shit.
Monero
So
is
anyway,
not in a bear market. No way.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Like, it's like technically from the 800 price to where we are now, you would call that a bear market, but I just don't believe that fucking spike. Like, that was, I don't even believe that there was a hack. That shit was too up and down, too immediate. If a hack had really moved all of that money into Monero and they were smart enough to do that, they would be smart enough to not turn around 3 days later and then sell back into some other shitcoin and try and cash out, because that's too fucking obvious. Anyone at that level would know that you need time and transactions, time and usage in Monero to gain the privacy properties. So anyways, I think that was honestly, that also makes me suspicious of Zach XBT, the guy who continuously breaks these hack stories as the convenient excuse for why Monero pumps. Whatever, we've talked about that already. We don't need to go back into it. Maybe I'm wrong, guys, but I don't like the way that one feels, right? It doesn't feel right. Something feels off about that, but my feels don't determine reality. So, and again, like, all right, I'll just go on, since we don't have a guest, I'll go on a little philosophic rant here. Oh, guys, you fucking ANCAPs and Liberty people out there, you think that your intuition and feels count for the truth, but they don't. And it's okay to use your intuition, and it's okay to use heuristics, and it's okay to be like, the feels are off here, and you should do that. But you also need to understand what type of knowledge that is. You need to understand that that's not the final story on shit. And you have to understand the level when you're sort of waxing speculative. And you need to admit that to yourself, because your ability to classify knowledge correctly is the ability to have true strength of confidence when it comes to something that's important, right? So hopefully that makes sense. It's like very kind of like theory of knowledge kind of stuff going on there. Take it for what it's worth. All right. Anyways, Monero hash rate still looking fine. Not so bad at all, considering, all things considered. Monero transactions have actually ticked up just a little bit for the past, I don't know, about a week. Maybe more actually. No, almost 2 weeks now. Monero transactions have been around the 30,000, sort of oscillating around the 30,000 level. We've seen that before. We've had this kind of time frame before where that happens, but it's not super duper often. It only happens once every few months. So it would be really fucking cool to see this metric stay at the 30,000 level over the course of a few months. Maybe that's a pipe dream. Maybe that's just my Monero transactions wet dream. I don't know. But hopefully, right? One can hope. Okay, let's talk about crypto. Let's go to Bitcoin, not crypto. No, it's crypto. Satoshi called it cryptocurrency. Yeah. Okay. So here's the Bitcoin we've been talking about. Where we say, is this real? Is this the bottom here? I have a hard time believing that, especially on this spike that happened here and then came right back down. This is starting to feel like, I don't know. Another bull flag in progress. Sounds to me like it could be another bull flag, another bull fag in progress. Oh shit! I hope I didn't just get us banned for saying the FAG word. I didn't put the OT on it, so maybe it's fine. So I just don't believe this, guys. I don't believe this pattern. It still feels suspiciously similar to the last bear market. Let's go slowly. Oh, my wave magic is so slow to move. It feels like this guy. Feels like this guy right here. Look, we even have the little fucking spike up. We even have that little like tick up that come back down. Guys, it's the same fucking pattern, right? So hypothetically, how much longer do we have till the next crash out? That would be 14 days. So maybe you got 2 weeks left in Bitcoin. Now, listen, the pattern doesn't have to be identical. Patterns rhyme more so than they are identical. You can see that this is already a little bit longer in the tooth. And that kind of makes sense, right? Bitcoin's, like we said, the cycles are maybe extending. The patterns are, I don't know, maybe longer, right? Diminishing returns. I don't know. This cycle didn't really extend. The high was in October. It actually contracted a little bit. Last time the technical absolute high was November. This time it was October. But overall, I mean, it's basically, 4 years still. Anyways, this is the same fucking pattern as we saw in the summer of 2022. This thing's going to crash down, guys. Like, I guess I'm feeling more confident about that assessment. That it just seems at every single point, it has been this has literally been the exact same bull market pattern as we saw 4 years ago. And sure, why not? Like, why wouldn't they do that? Like, they made a lot of money off of sort of selling that off to everybody. So, why not run a repeat? Okay, so yeah, Bitcoin not looking great here. I don't know. Is it possible that this thing could do maybe one of these, right? Maybe get to like the $75,000, $80,000 point before, could this bull flag sort of extend here for some period of time? Yeah, 100%. This thing could extend into the summer without breaking a sweat and then still break down. That's totally reasonable possibility here. So, or it could just break down in the next couple weeks. Either one of those things could happen. Okay, so there's Bitcoin. Let's look at some of the other stuff. I guess Tron. Maybe Tron is up because everyone's fleeing to the quote unquote safety of Tether. I guess, I don't know. Who knows, right? Everything else actually pretty in a pretty tight formation here. Like everything on their Z-scores, that is, everything is pretty close. Monero's still doing, a little bit higher than everyone else, and that makes sense because Monero has just been overall outperforming a lot of coins. Hopefully that continues. Who knows? Bitcoin dominance. I was actually looking for this chart to break down. I was hoping this chart would break down. This is where my emotions kind of maybe interfere with my analysis. I don't know, but this chart still doesn't look strong, but it is, as of this moment, looking stable, right? So we are sort. There is like a pretty clear upper and lower standard deviation band structure that this thing wants to stay inside of. And since it didn't break down in this past week and instead hit the upper standard deviation levels, to me, that's kind of a sign that this chart is probably now has the strength of momentum to continue sideways and actually not make a break towards the upside or the downside. So that's probably what I would expect for the Bitcoin dominance here. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I feel like this thing maybe should break down, but guys, shitcoins are dying. Like the rest of the crypto market is in really dire straits in a lot of ways. Maybe not all of it, like Ethereum is going to hold its own because again, Ethereum has organic usage, reason for existence. Even Tron has some kind of like organic usage and reason for existence, or Link maybe. But I mean, if you look at the Link chart, that it does not look like a good chart. So again, it's the problem is that so much of the gains were front run on the front side of cryptocurrency. So much of those gains were speculated on early on, pumped the price. And now it's like, well, now the actual organic usage has to catch up to the price. Whereas Monero is kind of the opposite. Like Monero has a shitload of organic usage that dwarfs a lot of other coins. But the price in terms of like the relative skew of how prices are distributed in crypto, Monero hypothetically would have a long way to catch up to get to that sort of over speculated value and propped up value of these other shitcoins. At the end of the day, they don't lose money. The cabal doesn't lose money, right? They don't care if everybody else does, which is a quote from a movie for those, if you know, you know. They don't care if everybody else does. They don't lose. And so the problem is that if there's not enough new people coming into this market to buy up the shitcoins, then those prices have nowhere to go but down. So in such a scenario, you would actually say that Bitcoin dominance would hypothetically go up. I again kind of see like I have very ambivalent feelings here when it comes to Ethereum, because Ethereum is actually something that works. It's used. It does all the stuff that Bitcoin was supposed to do. Its privacy is better, like way easier to use Tornado Cash and legal. And there's all of these, like, you know, Bitcoiners used to talk about programmable money. That's what Ethereum is. Like, Ethereum is just a better version of Bitcoin in almost every single regard. However, that's kind of a negative against it, because if you're like the deep state insider bankers, whoever, you don't really want, like, you are the middleman. You want your services and you want your cut and you want to stay the middleman. You don't want to transfer that to a permissionless distributed system, right? You want to be the permissioned centralized system that takes a cut from everything. So while Ethereum is far more useful than Bitcoin and hypothetically should have a much higher market cap, you can also kind of see the reasons why some kind of price management might want to be done on Ethereum to prevent that system from being too useful. And I think that's what a lot of the attacks, the SEC attacks against all of the tokens, and calling everything a security, right? I think that's probably what a lot of that was about, was to prevent an exodus from the traditional system into Ethereum and or ETH-like platforms, smart contracts platforms. All right, so that's what the state of crypto looks like here recently as of the past week. Let's go ahead and take a look at the macro. Now, I think everybody knows some orange dude decided to instigate a bombing campaign against some brown dudes over in Persia, Iran. And as a result, the price of oil has spiked from $66 to $91. So that's quite the spike there. The lifeblood of the military-industrial complex is finally being valued at levels that the deep state prefers it to be valued at. They want high price. They don't want a high price of oil, but they want a reasonably high price of oil. Petrodollar, right? And lo and behold, as the price of oil spiked, can you believe it? The dollar index spiked with it. The Dixie, the dollar, is now stronger as a result of the price of oil being higher. Go figure. Wow, who could have guessed, right? Who would have thought that? Certainly not us. So again, guys, these wars are about oil, and they're not about securing oil for the United States. We have more than enough. We have vastly enough. In fact, there's so much. The world is awash in oil, which is why they have to create an artificial scarcity situation, because countries that have energy can develop their internal resources. And a lot of countries, most countries, have some kind of significant internal resource. There's also the China question, right? They're like frenemies, right? We import all this shit from China, but maybe it was too much. And so part of this is also about denying oil to China, but it's also about denying oil to the rest of the world. When oil costs twice as much as it should, that makes it a lot harder for you to develop your resources. So is this the World War III doomsday end of the world scenario? From everything that we've seen the past year and a half, everything is so fucking fake, guys. Like, it's hard for me to really see this as escalating into World War III. This feels more like economic management than it feels like, true, I don't know, transnational, international conflict. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I guess we'll have to see, right? I'm just guessing here, but that's what it feels like. So, oil is kind of hitting some resistance levels, right? We're talking about the top of the blue band structure where we've got our horizontal area of significance, this dotted line right there. That goes back to kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's sort of an arbitrarily drawn line, but you can see that was sort of like the mid-level price that we stayed in for, I don't know, about 5 years. And sort of the rebound shock. Overall, this feels generally in the neighborhood of some kind of resistance. So that would kind of be good if we're going to talk about the gold price, because the gold price took a little bit of a hit, and I'll tell you, it's kind of funny. As oil spiked and as the Dixie, the dollar index spiked, if we look at gold here, that is simultaneously the moment that gold took a big dip, right? I don't know if you can see that, but look closely at the crosshairs on the other charts. They're all aligned in time, and you'll notice that gold dipped at the moment that the dollar index pumped. So if the dollar index, if oil and the dollar index are approaching sort of resistance levels, then that gives us the potential, that gives us the very plausible scenario where gold makes another breakout. Let's see. Let's take off. Let's add some of my statistics. The purple lines are very useful for us. These are actually bull market bands. They're an acceleration metric, right? They are the moving standard deviation of the moving standard deviation, right? We're just stacking turtles on top of each other. And they're actually, it's a very good bull market band structure typically. And you'll notice that when gold spiked up beyond the way that the purple bands were moving, you'll notice that it took a big movement back down. But just like last time, just like back in October when we saw a big spike up, and then we had this sort of like a stabilization time period for a couple months, things are setting up very similarly right now. We've got gold immediately moved back towards the top side, immediately wants to do this. And of course, that makes sense. What happened when the Ukraine war started? Gold pumped, commodities pumped. And that, again, that makes sense. When you have global instability and no one is sure about whose credit, right, about whose central bank has the best money or the best fake money, fiat money, people go to the safety of gold. People say, well, we always know that that's why it's a reserve. It's a class, I'm saying it's a tier 1 asset. It's a tier 1 reserve among central banks. And so it makes sense that gold is going to continue performing for as long as geopolitical retardation continues. Okay, so anyways, what we're saying here is we're looking for this chart to continue moving towards the upside over the coming, I don't know, let's just say 1-2 months. Eventually, we're going to look for another breakout to another level. I don't know where that level will be. At the moment, I'm a little bit muted in how fast I think that can happen. Hypothetically, it could just, break out and do one of these, right, and keep going in that fashion. What would be on a long-term basis more realistic to expect would be something in this band structure, right, to continue doing something like this. And that would be sort of the more stable, sustainable way to get to, say, $10,000. And at this moment, I don't think we can rule out $10,000 as a possibility. While we're on gold, why don't we just stay on gold? So let's go to gold versus oil. We talk about the markets, everything looking fundamentally different. It feels like we're in a different monetary landscape than we have been for the past 40 years, 50 years. And the gold versus oil chart shows that in a big way. We have to go back to 1980. And if you guys remember, obviously what happened in 1980, oh, I love saying it. I'll say it. I always say it. President Nixon decided to protect America against the speculators by removing the peg of gold.
That was 71.
71?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. That was 71. Sorry, but there was a big, so that the 71, when they did that, the 1980 spike, like that precipitated the decade-long bull market in metals that culminated in the 1980 spike at the very top here. So we're looking at the gold versus oil chart. Thank you for correcting me on that, by the way. I don't know what I was thinking. You're right. It was 1971. But anyway, so that spike up here in 1980 is like, we are now beyond that, right? We're now beyond that level. So again, like, this is the kind of stuff I mean, like things are different. Like something is different fundamentally about the landscape here. And I guess that makes sense. Gold versus the stock market. This is gold versus the S&P. Again, this is kind of like a level that you would call resistance, but this resistance does not have to stop right here. It could be here. It can even like do a quick spike above that. And if fundamentally shit's going crazy, it could easily get up to this level here as well. So, I would be sad if we only made it this far, but I mean, they do push the stock market just continuously. Okay, so that's enough about gold, I guess. We're running long in the tooth here. I decided to take some extra liberty with some extra time because since we don't have a special guest, I could just rant a little bit more. All right, let's look at stocks and then we'll probably call it a day after that. S&P 500, so continues to have a little bit of problem performing here, and I'm actually starting to get concerned about this curvature. This curve right here is not the best curve. This is actually typically indicative of a topping action. And could it be that Bitcoin led the way into the bear market and now the S&P is going to have some kind of bear market? It's possible, guys. Like, it's possible. I'm not seeing too much on the macro that looks horribly concerning, but there are some eyebrow raising things like this unemployment, the unemployment numbers here. The fact that this has gone up, I don't think the SOM rule has been broken. I just think that they have extended it. I think that the unemployment is probably still going to keep creeping up here. That would make a little bit of sense to me, a little bit too much sense to me. M2 money continues increasing, but these numbers are delayed by like a month, sometimes two. Although the Federal Reserve balance sheet is not delayed by a month or two, this is a weekly chart. Still, I guess they're slightly increasing their balance sheet now. It's just starting to creep up. That makes sense because we have turned that corner when it comes to rates. The Fed is lowering rates. Nothing really suspicious here in the bond market just yet, but one thing, they stopped publishing the Fred numbers here, so I guess I got to go through these charts and combine them again, which is kind of annoying. There's two ways to view the bond numbers, the U.S. Treasuries numbers. We won't talk about that; it doesn't matter right now. But, anyways, yeah, I mean, things don't look like dangerously macro crashy right now, but the stock market definitely is showing that pattern of maybe the top is in for the stock market, and the stock market moves slow, guys. Like, it could be 6 months where the thing just wanders sideways, takes a few dips, hasn't made a new high. It can do that, like, and then it can like just crash out. Like, sometimes that's how the stock market, bear market happens. The NASDAQ is looking a little bit more stable than the S&P, but we have clearly left the primary bull market channel that we were given back starting in 2022. Right, this bull market channel is definitely cleanly ended. We're not getting back into that channel anymore. So, let's make sure. Do we have any? Did I miss any XMR chats? We do have Frank Rogowski on YouTube said that is silver the catalyst to tip over the debt markets? COMEX is very low as deliveries are elevated. It could be a catalyst. I don't know if I would call it the catalyst, but yeah, I mean, just the fact of metals performing the way that they are in such a fundamentally divergent manner than how they've performed before. Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be a factor that weighs on their monetary trickery. And then he also asked, how is the private credit market impacting the shitcoins, Bitcoin and ETH heading down? I don't know. I haven't looked at the private credit market at all. I couldn't really say. We could maybe look at credit spreads, but I can tell you what they are right now. Credit spreads are fine, like they're low. If I can find them, I used to have them. Oh, here we are. Yeah, so credit spreads are the difference between government yields and corporate bond yields. And when everything is jolly and fine, then what you expect is a very low difference between government treasuries and corporate bonds, because everyone's like, yeah, everything's fine. I'll loan money to corporations. I'll buy their bonds. And then it spikes up during times of uncertainty because you're like, well, is this motherfucker going to go bankrupt? Am I ever going to get paid? I don't know. But the government can always just print the money. So they're like, Uncle Sam is good for it, but I don't know about Steve Wozniak or whoever the fuck, whatever corporation you might want to insert there. Sam Altman. Although, wait, is OpenAI traded on? I don't think OpenAI is traded on the public market yet. It will be eventually. Anyways, credit spread's looking fine. So that's the best I can do to answer your private credit impacting shitcoins question. It looks to me like private credit is still relatively fine just based on this one chart. But obviously there's other ways to look at that, but we're not going to dig into that right now. Do we have did I miss? No, I don't think no, that's got to be an old comment. All right. All right, guys, that's all I got for you.
What are your thoughts, Bawdy, on the possibility of stagflation with the oil price increasing as it has been due to the war and the unemployment numbers still ticking up? What do you think about the thought of stagflation?
I suppose that's always a possibility. If we were to look at sort of the previous cycle, so again, the 1970s, the stagflation of the 1970s, if we wanted to try and call this, the COVID-induced stagflation that happened for some period of time, and we want to compare it to this, then we'd say, well, maybe there's another spike coming. I think that is incorrect, because overall what they have done is they've gotten these inflation numbers back into a historical band range. Like, if we were to plot the standard deviation bands of, let's mute the blue one, that's the producer price index, but the core inflation is in orange, and then the total CPI is in white. You'll notice that we are now at levels that are effectively, they're still just a little bit higher than they were over, from the 2000s and in the teens. We're still just a little bit higher, but it's not like it was over here where you kind of had this like, 1, 2, 3 hit. These inflation rates, they never got back down to their trend. So I think that they actually did it right this time. I think they probably learned their lesson from the 70s, because you have to realize the Keynesians, this was a monetary experiment for the past 100 years, and they've had to learn lessons about the way in which their tools, J. Powell and his tool, the way that they smack the markets around with their tool, they have had to learn how to deploy that correctly. And I think they've actually learned those lessons. So that's why people are like, the monetary system's about to collapse, bro. Bro, it is not about to collapse. They actually have fine-tuned their capacity. And maybe that's kind of a good thing, but maybe it's not. Maybe the system needs to collapse to actually have any real change, but that implies a lot of suffering. So, shit, guys, I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you there, Body. Looks like Tony's not going to be able to do news today, so we're going to have to probably do it.
Okay. Yeah, Body. So, I mean, in terms of like when crypto turns around, could it be as simple as determining when the Fed is going to start lowering interest rates? Is that going to be like directly correlated, do you think?
That would be interesting. It might be like if there was some, let's suppose there's some emergency that happens, right? A macro crash scare, and then they quickly lower rates. Yeah, that would definitely send crypto higher, just on the speculative nature of the thing.
Yeah, I could see some kind of scenario where things change fast. Everybody thinks oil is going to go to the moon, and then like Trump pulls some move where oil prices tank, and then lowering interest rates comes back into play. I don't know.
I mean, they're committed to lowering slowly, but maybe they'll have to increase that pace if there really is some like looming emergency.
I mean, yeah, it really does feel like Trump is going to want to pump the save the stock market at some point. Crypto with it. Whether or not he can pull it off, I guess, is to be determined, but it really does feel like there's going to be that moment.
You know, to that point, I think that J. Powell's term is coming up, and Trump has talked about replacing him, so I think, he'll probably just put some lackey in there that'll do whatever, inflate as necessary.
Yeah, J. Powell's up in May.
Yeah, exactly. We do have something. Not an old comment. Tip 0.001. Hi, this is not an old comment, and neither is the last one about PeerTube thing. Maybe there should be a timestamp, at least a date, on XMR chat comments, so you could see if they're old or not.
I agree.
Elias was asking, thanks for doing the great show. Just a reminder that everyone is still waiting for Doug to get his ass shit together, I guess, regarding DNS for the PeerTube instance to have an independent place to watch Monero talk, Monerotopia videos, tapping fingers on table. Yeah, man. Maybe you want to DM me again. Maybe you could help me get it up and running. Something so I just regarding DNS, yeah, whatever it takes, we could get it up, and I have nothing against getting it up and running on PeerTube. It's just the work involved to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
because a lot of people probably don't want to log into YouTube or Google just to leave a comment.
Yeah, I mean we're on Rumble too, or I mean at least we should be streaming on Rumble as well, or we post the videos thereafter. Yeah, we could do the PeerTube thing. No problem. DM me. We'll make it happen. All right. I guess we'll move on to the news. I don't know. I could see maybe, Buddy, what do you think of this? Maybe the bear market ending perhaps sooner than later. So there is another leg down, but it not being as drawn out as we think. Like maybe the Band-Aid gets ripped off faster than we think.
Yeah, that's possible, especially since the top was front run. The technical top was front run by about a month. Maybe the bear market low gets front run.
Yeah, I mean, like black swan event, the whole thing, everything crashes, and then it's like, the bottom is found, V-shaped recovery. Things start to kick off.
Instinctively, I feel like the bottom probably won't be a V. I feel like it'll take time to
drawn.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's just kind of like an intuition that I have. I couldn't tell you precisely why. I could probably like make something up, but we won't go there right now.
Reason I'm thinking other direction is just because things are so crazy right now. It's like anything can happen, like they could sink a U.S. ship on the strait, right? Or like there's so much room for crazy events right now, given what's happening in Iran. I could just see like there being a moment where it's like, oh my God, everything, sell everything. And then everybody's like, oh, it's not nearly as bad as we thought. In fact, it's good.
Well, the great thing is,
everything's on. Yay.
The great thing is that Monero will be $371 by the end of this year.
Why is where are you
Because that's the moving average.
Moving
with the
average.
180.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, bro, your moving averages are they're crushing everybody.
All right. I will go ahead and run the news since we have no Tony today. Let me go ahead and do that. Bada beep. Bada boop. Here we go.
The Monerotopia Weekly News segment is sponsored by WizardSwap.io, a non-custodial cryptocurrency exchange.
Crabby motherfucker tipped 0.0001 XMR. How hard is it to get the audio levels right? Buddy is about 20 dB louder than Doug today. Yeah, we need.
Should I turn myself down, or should you turn
yourself up? You guys got to tell
up?
us. Let me see if I can do it from my end.
Well, I'll turn myself down some here.
No. Leave yours. Leave yours.
Okay.
Leave yours. I'll raise mine a little bit.
Yeah, you are maybe a little bit quiet.
Yeah, that's just my freaking setup sucks, man. I can't. Like, we got all this expensive equipment. I feel like our sound always just blows.
He did say that my audio is 20 dB louder. He didn't say that you're 20 dB quieter, so I think that's a clear bias of language. I'm going to turn myself down a slight bit.
Okay. Yeah, guys, let us know if the sound is okay. Hello. All right, yeah, let me continue with the news here.
Yeah, see, I've found no problem with the audio levels, which is why I've not said anything. If it was really bad, I would have said something.
Why are these?
Oh, maybe I need to. I'm gonna set my auto. Why did I turn it off? Anyways, I just set its automatic adjustment here, so maybe that helps.
All right, let me quickly run through these. Sound is fine. Thank you, man. Thank you. All right. Yep. I think Bawdy mentioned this. Kraken gets Fed master account in crypto first. So Kraken is the first exchange to get a Fed master account, a watershed milestone in the history of digital assets. Kraken became first crypto firm to win access to Fed's core payment systems. Kraken's banking unit has won access to the Federal Reserve's core payment systems, making it the first crypto firm to be able to move money on the same rails used by thousands of banks and credit unions. The approval of the master account at the Fed will allow Kraken Financial to handle transactions more quickly and seamlessly for big clients and professional traders. Having a Fed master account will have Kraken Financial Direct will give Kraken Financial Direct access to FedWire, a critical interbank payment system that handles funds transfers. Yeah, I don't know, buddy. What is your take on that? I mean, you see that as showing that Kraken isn't as based as we thought, or what's your?
I mean, they've been trying to do this since forever, and if you're going to operate a corporate exchange, this is absolutely the thing that you want. I have heard there's a couple people out there that sing out like a parrot about Tether being like the Tether to US dollar connection being primarily mediated through Kraken. The extent of that truth I haven't tracked down. It seems hard to believe that there would be no other Tether to dollar on and off ramps. I don't know. Like, does this mean Kraken is not based? They kept Monero the whole time, so like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't like.
It's pretty incredible that that they're able to keep Monero this entire time while getting this additional licensing. Essentially, it's like they're at the highest level in terms of being integrated with the fiat system, the fiat banking system, and they've been allowed to list Monero throughout it. So very, very bullish in that respect, kind of leading the way, right? Showing that it can be done. Like you can, if you are an exchange, you can in fact list Monero.
Thank God that crypto is finally integrated with the banks. That was Satoshi's vision, I think, from the beginning.
I do think it is bullish for Monero, and like you said, it does expose these other firms, right? Like we've always said, right? There's other reasons. It's not necessarily regulations. It's not the bid license. It's they simply don't want to list Monero, and yeah, it's probably for Zcash reasons. Seems to be the obvious reasoning there. Next story. I apologize for the whining baby in the background. She's a little sick today, guys. The meritocrat, she runs XMR Bazaar, by the way. The end of Paraleini Polis. After a decade of a symbol of freedom, hacking, and privacy tech, home to multiple Monerocon and cypherpunk gatherings, the era of Paraleini Polis comes to an end due to financial pressures and the property owner's decision. So, yeah, sad to see, guys. There was a bunch of drama there, money issues. I don't know. Partners couldn't agree. I don't really know what was happening there, but it was an amazing institute. It was an awesome part of crypto history and crypto anarchy or cypherpunk history. They peaked with Monero taking the place of Bitcoin in the window there, and I wonder if it's still there to this day. I don't know, but yeah, I'm very unfortunate to see them go. Sad to see them go. Great memories hanging out there at MoneroCon, and hopefully something else comes to replace them. Sad to see, though. Sad to see.
The next one will be in Monero.Town in Argentina.
Yeah, we could open one there. It was a really awesome spot. It was also... Hold on, guys. I'm sorry.
That's fine, man. Don't worry about it. The baby is... It's honestly like fairly quiet. It's not really distracting.
Yeah, and the babies are important. It's not like, it's not like you have a life outside of Monero or anything.
She's a future Monero holder and user,
sorry.
so you gotta take care of it.
Heck yeah.
She's being muted right now. Hold on. We're feeding her right now.
It's a horrible way.
Sad to see. But yeah, let's see. Next story here. Oh yeah, so we had Chamath. He's a well-renowned billionaire, Silicon Valley guy.
He's on the All In podcast.
Yeah, he's a Zcasher. He's like, I guess part of the VC funding of Zcash. Here's his take on the critical flaw of Bitcoin. Sounds familiar, guys. Let's hear what he has to say.
I think the reality is that Bitcoin, for the most part at this point, there's a structural failing in Bitcoin that I think people will need to come and wrap their heads around. The structural failing is that it is not... So if you think about like what is the value maximizing function right now for a crypto asset to be broadly adopted, it needs to have the features that allow a central bank to adopt it. And there are two things that it lacks. One is fungibility and two is privacy. And so Bitcoin fails on those two dimensions. So it can never be a structural holding of a central bank. Mm-hmm. And that simple thing will keep it in the realm of ETFs and humans. And
does gold satisfy those conditions?
Yeah.
Fungibility, but not easily.
Both. You have no idea how much the Bank of China owns. You don't know how many ounces they own. You don't know how many ounces I own. When there's a public ledger that says this address has this much, and you can't really trade it because you know the history and the provenance of that exact token. It's been used to buy this. It was transacted over here. It went to this wallet. That lack of fungibility and privacy is a huge deterrent for broad structural adoption. That's what you need to then add another 10x of market cap. So is there room for a different crypto asset that solves for the privacy and fungibility? Yeah. And are there projects right now? Yes, but they're very small scale. There's huge issues with them. Those are even more volatile. So Bitcoin's interesting. I think the
All right, guys, there you have it. Yeah, basically described Monero without saying the M word.
I would have to disagree. He said that those projects were more volatile, and from what I've seen, Monero is less volatile than Bitcoin. Monero works better as a day-to-day currency than Bitcoin does.
Yeah, I think he was referring to Zcash, which is kind of funny because it's not even fungible, right? I mean, it's clearly not fungible. We could at least agree on that. I think every Zcasher needs to at least agree to that. I mean, we can't pretend it is. Are we going to pretend that it's default private? It's not fungible. There's a portion of it that has fungibility, but you can't ignore the other side of it, which is not fungible. So it doesn't even check those boxes. Next story. We mentioned this earlier. Riccardo, Fluffy Pony. Hi, everyone. I'm stepping away from work things, including Tari, to deal with some personal matters. I love Tari and deeply believe in its future with all of my heart. Unfortunately, I have some things to attend to that take priority over my work. Thank you to everyone for your understanding and for supporting Tari and me. Sad to see. But yeah, man, people have lives. People have to deal with things that are more important than your bags and even our projects, right? Sad to see. Maybe Fluffy will come back sooner than we think. Not as sad as when he stepped away from Monero. I gotta say, I was heartbroken when he stepped away from Monero. So now it's like I'm kind of already used to the abandonment. Tari's cool. You know, I don't have a lot to say about it. I'll be honest though. I wish Riccardo never really stepped away from Monero itself. I felt, you know, it was at a moment too when it was very early days of Monero, right? The growth potential tremendous, and we're seeing it to this day continue to grow. But I get it. He wanted to work on other things. So best to him. I hope everything's all right. Nothing too serious. And I hope we see him back in action soon. And maybe when he comes back in action, maybe he'll do some more Monero things as well. Next story. Bank rejects White House stablecoin rewards deal and stall Clarity Act. So yeah, the banks aren't playing ball with basically Coinbase. These are the guys that are at the table. They're trying to make the deal over the Clarity Act. Banks have rejected a compromise proposed by the White House on a major U.S. crypto market bill. Officials attempted to broker a middle ground between banks and crypto companies. The proposal allowed stablecoin rewards in limited access, such as peer-to-peer transfers between users. However, the plan prohibited incentives on idle stablecoin balances. Crypto companies accepted the plan. Banks have rejected it, fearing large outflows. So, yep, the banks are worried that if the Clarity Act passes, basically stablecoins are going to replace their scheme, because you'll be able to, you know, collect interest on your stablecoins. Theoretically more than the interest that you'd be getting at a normal bank, you know, through fractional reserve. It would completely kill the entire banking business model. So yeah, the banks are fighting hard to prevent basically stablecoins being allowed to exist in this manner.
If you want fiat yield, go buy yourself some Monero and you can get 15.4%.
There you go.
There might be some consternation, like some contention here between what the government wants and the kinds of, like, because the government loves Tether. It's they were able to leverage Tether stablecoins into a means of covering demand for their treasuries. Right. So if there's ever shortfalls, they can just they previously had to use like dark pools of money in random countries like Liechtenstein and shit like that to cover shortfalls of demand. But they can use stablecoins now to do that exact same thing. And there might be some contention here between that useful function that the government sort of covertly fostered with Tether over the years, and the establishment banking system, right? There could actually be some internal conflict there. I mean, we talk about, the banks, the big banks and Big Fi, and they're all, it's just the same as the government, and they're all married, whatever. But they're having some marital strife right now, I think, with regard to this.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, people are saying, this will be another basically catalyst that can turn around the crypto market once the Clarity Act passes and all that jazz. But yeah, it looks like it's still being held up. Next story. Coin Bureau put out a tweet. Crypto trader robbed of 24 million in violent incident. Crypto trader Silly Tuna claims she was violently assaulted and forced to hand over 24 million worth of crypto in Aave, Ethereum, USDC. The funds were traced and they quickly moved across layer 2 networks, Bitcoin and Monero, to obscure the trail. So once again, Monero being used as the tool for making things fungible again. I always see this as bullish news. I know there's those that try to paint it in a negative light. But yeah, it shows Monero is being used. I don't know. Maybe that was part of the pump that happened this week, or not pump, but maybe part of what held up Monero better than other cryptos this week, potentially. Let's see. Next story. Bada beep. Here we go. Cointelegraph again. No, this was Cointelegraph. Who was the last one was Coin Bureau. This is Cointelegraph. Big Donald Trump cyber strategy backs crypto and blockchain while hinting at crackdowns on mixers and privacy coins. So yeah, the White House put out, their kind of updated stance on their cyber strategy for America. And I'll try to bring it up here, I think. Yeah, so what I don't really get is why Cointelegraph is pointing this in a negative light for Monero and privacy coins and mixers. I gave it a quick read. I didn't see anything too negative in there with regards to being okay with crypto, okay with blockchain, but not okay with privacy coins. So a little odd that Cointelegraph is like broadcasting that as being the story here. I don't really see anything that really goes at privacy coins. So, I think Grok brought it up here. The source is the White House officials' President Trump's cyber strategy for America PDF, which they released yesterday. Key excerpt that relates to being anti-privacy coin. We will build secure technologies and supply chains that protect user privacy from design and deployment, including supporting the security of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. Okay, wait, what? That sounds good. So, analysts note accompanying language on cutting criminal financial infrastructure. So they said something about eliminating criminal financial infrastructure. They never mentioned the word privacy coins. They never mentioned the word mixers. They just said criminal financial infrastructure. So to lop in Monero with being, defined part of the definition of criminal financial infrastructure, I think is kind of a stretch. Interesting that Cointelegraph is jumping to that conclusion. Like I said, I give it a quick read, but it's very short, and I didn't see anything that was negative privacy coins. In fact, I saw a line in there that was pro privacy. If I could quickly find it, I don't know, where is it? I mean, basically, there was a line saying that they're going to, uphold citizens' privacy. So if anything, I saw a under promote common sense regulation at the end. We will emphasize the right to privacy for Americans and American data. So if anything, I'm seeing, pro privacy policy, not anti privacy policy, but, yeah. That's all I got for the news this week. We covered that other story about Linux and other software being forced to implement essentially KYC in the core kernel of their infrastructure. Another big privacy-related story.
Was that backstage though, or did we actually talk about that on the live?
No, we talked about it in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember if we talked about it just backstage or if we talked about it in the live.
Yeah. Any other big stories I'm missing? Obviously, the war in Iran. Bawdy touched upon that in price report. I think that covers the big Monero news.
There is a website if you want to if you guys want to go to it. It's like give me a second here. Let me pull it up. It's IranCostTicker.com, and it tells you exactly how much they're spending on this Iran war, and it's 34.7 Monero per second, or 3.01 million Monero per day. So far, in just the 7 days, they've spent 22 million Monero worth in this war.
It's like these numbers don't even have any meaning, right? Anyways,
and 22 million Monero don't even exist.
Yeah, they have endless resources, right? They have the power. So yeah,
use Monero.
The only thing that will stop them, right, is politics, right? Some reason as to why they need to stop doing what they're doing, because it will, they could lose power here.
By using Monero, you will help end wars.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. That's the best way for us to fight back, opt out, use Monero, ignore what's going on in Normie land. All right, yeah, that was the news. We could go ahead and run the viewers on stage segment if anyone wants to jump up.
You need to run the guest segment for the sponsor thing.
Yeah, we could do that too. Let me run viewers on stage, see if anybody wants to jump up. And then maybe we even make one of those people this week's special guest. Here we go.
The Monerotopia Viewers on Stage segment is sponsored by XMR Bar. Play dice with Monero using a privacy-respecting and provably fair algorithm. Go to xmr.bar. As always, verify and never trust.
Please gamble responsibly in accordance with the laws of your jurisdiction.
All right. Do we have anybody? We have Alaska. I think he's there. Or just chilling.
Yes, please gamble responsibly.
What's up,
Please
brother?
gamble responsibly and follow the laws of your jurisdiction.
We're all about following the law here on Monerotopia, so.
Oh, absolutely.
Stay obedient.
Jurisdiction.
Our own jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction.
That's open to
follow the laws of Liberland, as that is where we are found jurisdictionally.
I like the etymology of words. Like that word jurisdiction is like, it's such made up Pharisee bullshit. It's like you have the right to judge the addiction. That's a coded way of saying dictator.
I am an e-resident of Liberland, so
I believe it would actually mean who is allowed to dictate over you, like what community is allowed to boss you around is pretty much what it means, like in its most pure etymological. It's
who's your owner?
The lies of democracy like started so long ago, if you think about it.
It would be in a much better spot if we were all just like, if everybody was just like, yeah, it's violence. Now maybe it's like reasonable violence, but yeah, we're going to impose this diction on you, and well, and not couch it in all this language about this lofty morality and laws and all this stuff, and just be like, listen, this is what we think as a society, as a group of people. We're going to enforce it with violence. And okay, we should talk about morality and philosophy, but it would just be better if we were more raw about the language about what's actually happening.
I think we have a steep climb to get people's minds ready for thinking that way again, because words meaning things is, I mean, apparently you pretty much have to be like 30 years old or older in most cases to even like conceptualize something like that anymore, because words mean nothing nowadays.
If the world was smarter, we would need a euphemism for euphemism.
We got another XMR chat here. You can say F word in the username 10.001XMR. Calling Monero criminal infrastructure, as was mentioned in the news, is not just a stretch, it's a blatant lie. Whoever said that is an idiot. If Monero is criminal infrastructure, then so is the air we breathe. Criminals breathe air too. 100%. 100%. I didn't bring up the Bloom. I don't know if you guys brought up the Bloomberg news article last week. I wasn't here. It actually dropped during Monerotopia. It was an article on Monero, how it's being adopted in the dark markets.
Yes, we did bring that up because we said that if 48% of markets are using Monero, that means that 52% of the markets don't care about their users.
You know, it's really
wild.
No,
I was interviewed. I was interviewed for that article. XMR Bazaar was mentioned. And yeah, obviously I pointed out to the fact that just means Monero works as intended, right? So
we had speakers at Monerotopia that were like light years ahead of all of the research in that article. And then we had one of the main people being interviewed in that article was hosting the Monerotopia. The moral of the story is get your news from Monero Talk because Bloomberg is way behind.
Yeah, years behind. Just like that billionaire finally talking about the lack of fungibility in Bitcoin. It's incredible. Like, why wasn't that guy talking about that 5 years ago? Why he's sitting there? Central banks aren't going to adopt Bitcoin. Like, you just realize this, man. You're like on the cutting edge of tech, and now you're only just opening your mouth up now about Bitcoin's lack of fungibility.
I have a thesis on this that I've been developing for like probably 4 months, but I now have enough like circumstantial evidence where I was going to kind of share it with the rest of. But one thing we should do before we forget is run the ad. Can't forget to run the ad.
Let's run the ad. Thank you so much for that. Quadrio Chaletta tipped 0.0001 XMR. Apologies if you spoke about this already. I saw on Reddit about looking for a host for Monero Talk, Monerotopia. Are you looking to step back? Succession plan for the show, Doug? Have you had much interest? No, it's not really about me stepping back. Just need more helpers. We have Shortwave. That's great helping us out, but he also doesn't like pressing the buttons so much, even though he did a great job last week. So we're looking for somebody kind of take on that role. Tux's role, Shortwave's role, co-host, and maybe if you're really good, maybe you take over host as well.
Somebody like on the producer level that could manage the stuff that the open source guys always, I don't want to say complain about. Their righteous indignation is valid, so I don't want to say complain, but like, you know, trying to keep up with a PeerTube instance and stuff, like somebody with the time and knowledge, you know, would be amazing at this point, wouldn't it?
Another Monero tip.
We don't censor you, but we might not say it either, bro.
I don't want the stream to get taken down on YouTube, guys. I would never use plain language for basic biological terms. Okay. Anybody new want to jump up, guys? Now's the time. And I could run the guest segment for you if you jump up. Oh, we do have Remsey. We got Remsey.
Hey, what's up?
Sweet.
I don't
What's
need
going
to,
on, brother?
I don't deserve the honor of the guest segment right now.
No. Yeah, you do.
I think we should run the guest segment for Alaska and have him tell us his theory thing that he was talking about.
All right, let's do that. Let's do it. Here we go.
The Monerotopia guest segment is sponsored by Cake Wallet. Store, send, receive, and exchange your Monero and Bitcoin safely on iOS and Android too. Cake Wallet is open source, and you always control your own keys.
Just a fair warning. Just a fair warning. If Alaska is going to be the special guest, take your kids out of the room, cover their ears, whatever needs to be done, because it could get spicy up in here.
No, they need this. Get all your kids gathered.
Gather them around.
Immediately. I have all of the right kinds of obsessions with kids. I think that all of society should be laser focused on turning your children into the best version of themselves that they can be. And anybody who's not doing that, and that doesn't mean you have to have kids. just means that you should be dumping a lot of your own energy, whether they're yours or not, in the next generation. There might be somewhat of a biblical worldview stuff behind that, but the data is there. It's the right thing to do. So, but I wanted to just point something out that I think is very fascinating about what that guy, the bajillionaire or whatever, like insider banker cartel guy at the global summit, it kind of ties in neatly to something. So if you were trying to both reduce the power of the United States empire as an entity, but simultaneously reserve all of the power that you have within it, and most of that power is leveraged out of the fact that you have the petrodollar, a lot of the moves that we're seeing right now make a lot more sense when you think about Tether. So if anybody doesn't know, Tether is planning on having like 15% of its reserves in gold. They're massive bondholders. And where it gets really interesting is when you look at the background of the CEO right now. It's Paolo Ardoino. I mean, I always say Arduino because it's, I don't actually know how to say the guy's last name. But this guy has quite the long run in the military tech world, especially securing data on clouds. And then the other thing is he jumps in, especially at Bitfinex, right at the same time as the Epstein crowd gets a hold of both Bitcoin devs and starts financing like payment rails. And when you see Trump going into his second, but also there was a lot of it going on in his first term, but that's a little hazy for probably a lot of this crowd right now. But if you look at what he's doing in the second term, and he's like, yeah, rah crypto, and then there's like not a lot of movement when he's in the White House, and yet he's putting people like Kushner and all these other guys that are directly affiliated with him and his being in power and constructing an empire legacy. Tether seems to be playing a crucial role in that. So while at the same time you want to be able to lock down competitors with things like the SWIFT system, remember the dollar would lose its reserve currency status if there aren't enough people all over the world circulating this as though it is a reserve currency. And the evidence that they've been using Tether for that is ridiculous. And if you don't know that, then I don't want to waste. Most people in this audience probably know about how like, Tether and the CIA and using it as like a back channel to still deal in dollars when the when the feds are not allowing people in normie land to use dollars on things like the SWIFT system or Iran or Russia or whatever. But there's a mismatch. So they've got to still have that back channel. And if Monero became like the back channel of choice, they would undermine their own power. So the other thing is, if the Fed came out tomorrow and said, we're going to buy like a bajillion ounces of gold, that would be very destabilizing for the dollar. So how do you get the dollar pegged to more gold? Well, since Tether is a stable coin and they have gold and the USD is what it's pegged to, and it's known for having a lot of gold, but at any moment China could come out and be like, I have all of this gold. You need to find a way to both be able to deflate the value of your currency, but simultaneously maintain your reserve status. Enter this guy, Paolo. And if you look at this guy, he looks like the most operate-y kind of. Every picture of Paolo is just the smuggest looking dude ever. And he has connections with all of these military institutions, mostly surrounding the United States. He's an early guy in Bitfinex. And then you look at the government's seizure of Bitcoin and then putting these mining operations in like low energy cost places like Uruguay. it all lines up with basically trying to create Tether as the new CBDC style US dollar. And since it's already established that it's pegged, now you have two vehicles that you can use to continue your clandestine, black ops, but still running the banking system. Now, why would you want to do that? It's pretty simple. If you have all of these leeches glued onto the productive classes of the world, well, these leeches are becoming too burdensome. So what's the great way to shake off a bunch of leeches? Well, number one, like all of your intelligence connections that are in Iran that have all of this autonomy, just shut down Iran. Penalize Russia until it bends the knee. Create a stronger relationship between Israel and Russia. Get a separate payment rail that's pegged to the dollar and put enough gold in it where it looks like a stable asset. All of these things have now taken place. And then you have to get a whole bunch, because the main sphere of influence would be anything south of Texas, right? You need to make sure that you still control anything south of Texas. Well, they've already got people all over South America using Tether, just like any other dollar. And this is an unbelievably efficient way to subvert the power broker class, but all of their underlings, and still take the absolute tippy top that are still willing to play ball and keep them in the fold. Well, if Tether took over, just like, the Clarity Act argument that we were talking about before, how many of these bootlickers who have been they've just gone on with the system forever because it's like, well, I have my job at the bank, I have my job at this government office. You have to eventually take the leeches off of the host, or you'll kill the host and you won't have any power as well. Between AI and Tether, it's the perfect way to do it. And now they're making overt decisions that line up with the idea of, yes, Tether is basically just the dollar. It always has been. And that's why they've been bankrolling the crap out of it. Body would probably remember this better than me. But remember when they got sued for like $1 bajillion? And then the next day, they just had the same number of dollars in bonds in their accounts like overnight. Do you remember that, Body?
I think Body stepped back.
Does anyone else remember? Like, I couldn't find it because
I remember Circle getting bailed out during the Silicon Valley Bank situation.
Yeah, and the best evidence that I have that this is like definitely what's going on, find me any other crypto project that got insured like Bitfinex did with those secure wallets. And then remember that massive hack, right? And then they had the two stooges that had like the weird names, and then they only served like 16.
Twins?
No, they're I think I can remember. Hold on.
Not the Winklevoss?
No, it was like one of them, the last name was Liechtenstein, like the city, and then his wife. But apparently, like, these guys that didn't even really fit the bill of like people who could hack this kind of stuff, they hacked like billions and billions in Bitcoin. But Bitfinex had insurance on this. And so they got to collect the insurance money. Then they helped the US government claw back all of that Bitcoin, which a lot of it is still with the DOJ right now. Only their banker buddies got any reimbursements on it, and everybody else just got screwed. So now the US government has a Bitcoin reserve. It was insured for Bitfinex, so they didn't lose anything, and they were still running stuff. And when the whole operation was over, a couple of days later, all of a sudden the guy wanders off and goes to run Tether. And it's like, there's too many super coincidences going on. And then the other thing is, I can't prove this, but Arduino or whatever, it's Ardoino. I've never figured out how to say it properly, but that same last name is connected to what is it, the Committee of 300. You know how a bunch of them are Italian bankers? He even has the same last name as one of those families. So he's born and raised in Italy. Apparently he was a coder by the time he was 8. He's like this super rock star security researcher. You know, when he's on stage, he doesn't necessarily talk like he's like the best of the best, and yet he has this massive team that just follows him around wherever he goes. He gets all of this money out of nowhere. He's the only guy who can get an insurance policy on an exchange. And then he gets to cash out just in time to go to Tether, and then just magically billions of dollars of bonds for him to start it. You know, and
it's
like
one big club and you ain't in it.
Yeah. And like Peter Schiff got murdered for having a bank in the same jurisdiction as this guy over literally nothing. He had like no criminal activity. And then this guy is doing like the sketchiest stuff you could possibly imagine from the eyes of a banking cartel. And yet he just gets a free pass after he just robbed the insurance companies for billions. And nobody's like, they don't even audit the guy. You know what I mean?
You can also look at the founder of Tether, Brock Pierce, has a pretty crazy Wikipedia page. He like was connected to Epstein, and yeah, he was also like in the Mighty Ducks. Like it's weird. And yeah, Ben, yeah, I don't know if we want to change the topic. Did anyone talk about like the OS level like age verification? Has anyone talked about
the kernel level?
Okay,
yeah, it was at the very
like,
beginnings, but
that's the most. The way they're rolling it out is like the most egregiously sus way. Like you could try to do that like through the state government, so that way it's like no one's really like accountable. Yeah, that's just like insane overreach, and I am actually curious to see if they're going to be able to succeed rolling that out. But it's just like I don't know what to say about that. Like,
yeah, listen to the first part of the show. Like once it comes back out, listen to the first part of the show. We talked about it, but the TLDW was basically that seems like very coercive. Like that seems like coerced speech, since coding is like open source code is free speech. That seems like very coercive speech. So that seems like a Supreme Court incident waiting to happen. And also with open source, I mean, it's just going to be stripped out anyway. Like if Canonical or Ubuntu or whoever puts this into their system, some people are just going to take it, fork it, strip it out, and then release it anyway. So the people
this fits very neatly in the other story about being able to compel people to write code or not write code. Remember, like if you don't build the kill bots, if you don't build their AI models, then we're going to steal all your stuff and put you in prison, the Anthropic thing, which is so astroturfed, right? Like but the thing is I think it's trying to set the chilling precedent without actually putting in a courtroom that if you do not write code for the kill bots, we will take all of your shiny baubles away. And now you have another one, which is they're trying to like put liability on anyone who develops anything unless it's done through the vehicle of a corporation that they can control. And it's pretty obvious why. What's the best mechanism for peaceful resistance that we have right now is code. So if they can remove that peaceful protest of writing code and having free speech in code, well, all of the other free speech is not dangerous to these people. They can already throttle your voice on things like social media. They've already made it where nobody goes to talk to each other IRL anymore. You know, it's like stay in your house, stare at your screen, and make sure that you're a good, obedient slave who only writes code for the corporations. It's kind of like the last channel we have that's the highly effective, I should say. There's a lot of channels, but like the most effective free speech, nonviolent channel that we have to resist the corporatocracy and all of that other stuff. So I really think that between Tether, the code lockdown, and compelled speech, this is kind of like trying to close any remaining gap for you will eat the bugs kind of thing.
Looks like
I'll read this real quick. Harlow West tipped 0.301 XMR. How is the progress going with Quai and Stefan Wolfram? What about variants from that proof of work? Has anything come out of the conference regarding this so we can avoid a 51% attack like that billionaire just now hinted at with his jaded look? Absolutely. Quai was at the conference. this is another reason why Monero Talk could you really use a producer, somebody who could chop up the recordings and, you know, maybe tweak the audio a little bit. It'd be nice to be able to find just the Quai or just the what was it, Bitmain, you know, conversations.
Yeah, that's true. The best of moments.
Yeah, but yes, there is actually a lot of movement on that. They had a lot of really interesting things to say. But there's multiple ways to avoid a 51% attack. One of them being, if not Bitmain, does anyone have a suggestion for how we can increase hash rate while simultaneously making that hash rate less accessible to server farms, data centers, and so on? As of right now, the best one I can think of would actually be probably Bitmain. All right, haters, go ahead. You know where my Twitter account is. I'll be sure not to read it.
It's also spelled Quai, Quai. But yeah, as I understand it, Quai is merge mined with a few other proof of work currencies like Litecoin, Ravencoin, Bitcoin Cash, and then I'm not sure what the fourth one is, but I think there's a fourth one. And maybe it's Monero. And then I don't know what he's talking about with the 51% attack, like billionaire thing.
Quai does a special thing that helps to prevent 51% attacks. I don't remember if it's work shares or not.
Yeah,
but
work shares.
Okay, the basic idea is sample the blockchain more often. So right now he's saying that Monero samples the blockchain every 2 minutes. So if you want a better average of what's actually going on in the network, you need to sample more often, and that would cause less variance.
I remember kind of Elias being the only one who was even like actively following some of the work around like having multiple chains of Monero mining going on at the same time. You remember that, Elias? And I still don't know why people weren't more interested in that. I thought it was brilliant. I'm not necessarily thinking like it was fully thought through or whatever, but it made a lot of sense to me, the idea of having multiple chains mining at the same time.
That's already how it works. That's how Cubic did their attack, is they mined a different chain on the side and then they like insert it.
No, it not orphan chains. It was on a technical level, it was very different than the idea of running like orphan and uncle. It was a
for Quai. Yeah. So basically like they're advised with Stephen Wolfram, because like Stephen Wolfram has like this model of reality. Like there's some specific like definition Stephen Wolfram's kind of famous for like describing reality, and they've like modeled their blockchain to essentially like align with this model of reality of like what like computation and reality. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I need to go back and watch that talk.
As if you ask me, and nobody did, but I'm loud and annoying. So the thing is a huge chunk of this really does boil down to Monero needs a mechanism to be able to fund a larger developer pool, because the amount of work and the amount of directions that this needs to go to really entrench itself as like the most immutable payment rail out there. For one, we definitely need more devs, and they have to be those top shelf devs. But we also need people who have that knowledge to get into the Monero research lab so they can start auditing and proposing and writing more white papers on steering all of this. I mean, how many people, Remsi and Body would probably remember more than me, but honestly, like at the core of all of the people who are developing for specifically the research side and the writing code side, we only have like 7, 8 guys, something like that.
I mean, no, there's plenty of volunteers out there. I mean, because there's so much out there. There's different Rust. You have like every single programming language out there. There's actually like a Monero library you can use. You can program if you want to do Monero transaction in Rust, Go, JavaScript. It's all out there. there's a lot of like unpaid work, open source work that goes out there. And I think it's great that the Monero community aligns so well with like the open source community, because like basically no one's really building some Monero software and then putting it out about closed source. And if they are, then they're getting flamed on whatever platform they're marketing on. But yeah, I mean, ultimately you do have a centralization risk if you have like, let's say you had 20 devs on staff that you were paying high, like you're gonna like it'd be more like Xano, where it's like, yeah, like we can change the code to be whatever we want. So yeah, I think Monero's strength is that it's really probably, I would say, one of the more immutable blockchains out there. And yeah, so that does have some inconveniences, and there is always trade-offs with anything. But yeah, I think I wouldn't say that that's Monero's most pressing issue, is like the developer, the amount of developers, especially with AI making development more efficient.
If there was a way, so by my calculations, if you wanted to pay like a top tier dev, a lot of them and I mean top tier dev, there are a lot of people that would take a decent pay cut to work on something that they believe in, because a huge chunk of people in the development space are willing to take less to do more if they knew it was consistent. Well, at $6 million a year, you could afford 100 devs at $120,000 a year. And if you had a way to reliably generate what is today in USD, phony fiat, Fed note, blah, 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 if you had a way to consistently raise $6 million a year for just your core dev team, and 10 of those people were allocated towards the Monero Research Lab. So you have 90 people working on specifically core and 10 paid employees that were working specifically on research. That would put us on par with like a very sophisticated project. And $6 million a year, if you could find multiple ways to generate it, is not that impossible. So for example, like some of the largest what are those called, like the donation websites that are like more mainstream, Kickstarter, yeah, some of the largest Kickstarter projects have broken 7 million, and you don't have to get it all from a Kickstarter, especially since that's like a lack of consistency. So you could just make it like part of the kind of the ethos of Monero power users. 1% of all of the wealth that you attain from Monero transactions, you put it right back to the the development group. Or so, I mean, there's a big chunk of money right there. Or like if you have like a Monero accepting business, you could build into your interface, like, would you like to add such and such amount to go towards the development core team? And this just becomes like standard practice. And then you could kind of build into one of the rules on the development core team. You have to have at least like 40% of your team outside of one jurisdiction. So if you get up to like 60% of them are Americans, you can only hire on people who are residing in a different jurisdiction. Or you see what I'm saying? Like there has to be a way where we can decentralize the devs and also fund the devs. And
yeah,
I think
that happens through the app layer. Like if you have more Monero apps and Monero companies, like Monero first companies, then they're like incentivized. If they have like a large portion of their business that's like dependent on Monero, they're incentivized to contribute to Monero as well as to their projects. So like for instance, Cake Wallet, like they contribute to the Monero project, they run nodes. And yeah, there's overall, good members of the community. So yeah, it's just about building through the circular economy. Like you can have businesses that are able to fund developers for all kinds of use cases. So I think that it has to come through ultimately, like you'll have corporations who are hiring the developers, and it's not like there's a Monero Foundation. I actually was at ETH Denver and I was telling about the Monero project that I'm building, and they were like, "So are you from the Monero Foundation?" And I'm like, there is no Monero Foundation, man. But yeah,
as much as that can be true, like, yes, Ramsey is part of that.
whoever's running with the inevitable world leader assassination market, whoever's making all the money from that, they'll fund the Monero project.
By the way, that's 19,000 Monero per year in funding.
If any Iranian or hackers are listening right now, and you should be, and good job, your situation is not looking great anyway. So whatever wealth you have left, let's get that wealth over to the Monero developer community. And as you're fleeing whatever you're fleeing, at least you have payment channels that you can still use. And also make good on that promise to wipe out credit scores.
I have a sort of different question that I'd like to bring up. Is that all right? So I've been thinking, this goes back to, it's a little bit related to the cubic attack, I guess, and that kind of stuff. But I'm thinking back to how transactions could happen at a time where there was no currency at all. So let's say you're selling something, you're selling bread, and I'm a hairdresser, and I want to buy bread from you. Then I'll say, okay, I'll cut your hair, and you give me the bread, right? That's a transaction that happens between you and me, and we're just passing the value directly, right? And there doesn't need to be any central authority who has any power over anything like money. We're just dealing directly in something that has value to us, right? And that's great from a freedom perspective, of course. There's no surveillance of that, and there's no central anything. So it's really nice. Now, it should be possible to do the corresponding thing digitally, and also with small amounts. If you just come up with a way to do it, and there's something that is considered valuable that you can pass to each other, where you really pass the value. And I think one example of that is just computational power. For example, a hash rate. So if I have some servers that are capable of computing some hash rate, and I want to pay you some value, then I can point my hash rate generation towards your Monero node, and then I've effectively paid you, right? And you can verify that you got the value because you can check the hashes that it's correct. It doesn't matter if you succeed in getting a block, right? And this can happen much more quickly than real Monero transactions. So that could be like there could be an economy going on where people pay each other like that. Do you know? Is this happening?
On Craigslist, I think there used to be a way you could the barter system, right? Because essentially that sounds like what you're talking about. And there was actually a famous guy who he took a pen and he used the Craigslist barter system and was able to trade it all the way up to a house. You can look that up. It's
the end of that is even better. Then he auctioned off the house or something like that. But
it was like a movie role somehow. I think ultimately was It's interesting.
It's actually, Elias, that's something that I wanted to do eventually. Was I was gonna get probably 2 of those the X9s, the Monero dedicated miners that Bitmain is producing, and I was basically going to auction off if somebody wants to pay for the power, then and I'll pay for the machine. And I was going to direct one of those to put every block that it finds, but it probably run it on peer-to-pool. But all of the rewards that it gets, I wanted to direct it towards the core team. Was something that I thought was really interesting. So, and especially since I get heat, somebody else covers whatever they're going to cover on the power. I cover the rest. And then all of the rewards go to Monero development. So somebody who's already sitting on Monero bags can basically ensure the value of their Monero by covering some of the cost of I think they do what was it, 1 mega hash per machine right now is the projected output of these things. So we could have 1 mega hash going directly to the core team and then another mega hash going to yours truly. but I would pay for all of that. But if there was enough demand for the first machine, then I would start offering the second machine for overflow. I wish I could put more than, 10 G's into it, but a guy's got to eat, right? So
yeah, I think it's just kind of bad for the decentralization of the network to really like rely on the core team. I would say. I think, like I said earlier, like I think the Monero development is best done through like the various companies that are in the Monero ecosystem have an incentive to further Monero. I think that's a more sustainable way and more decentralized way to build out Monero's tech.
But the thing is this is what we have now. I mean, you're 1,000% right, no doubt. But this is what we have now. And the other thing is kind of like this, the Git repo model has over and over again been the most efficient way to, push out updates and all of this other. I would love to see something better, but this is what we have now. And there's still so much work to do, right? Everything from cleaning up the code to, finding more solutions for hash rate, finding more solutions for decentralization. Like there's just too much to do until we build the financial infrastructure to distribute even the development work, and we just don't have it. So that's why I'm trying to build out the economic incentives for when I can speak to it better than code, right? I'm nothing of a developer, but I can figure out ways to fund stuff. So if we build out that financial infrastructure, then you now have the ability to, when a more decentralized development mechanism emerges that's promising, you can start distributing out the mechanisms for paying for this stuff. That's kind of the way but you're right. I know you're right.
And then, but yeah, the other thing is like there's been a lot of experiments with governance in the blockchain space. Like DAOs were kind of a bigger thing. Like, I mean, there's still DAOs around, but they kind of have become like centralized. Like the best DAOs are really corporations. And there's just been so many experiments that I've seen with blockchains and like the alternatives to governance to the corporate structure that have just not really worked out. Like the corporate structure, like people hate it, but it does at the end of the day work. Whereas like all these DAO structures, like unfortunately, don't really work. It seems like in theory, like in your head, it makes sense because you can go on Reddit or whatever, and it seems like it's a community. So okay, let's maybe create like Reddit, but there's like financial incentives, and it can actually do proper governance. And it hasn't emerged. And so like I mean, it's possible that could emerge. Someone could come up with, we need a like a Thomas Jefferson level like person to like see like, oh, we need to do these rules and find the perfect balance for financial incentives as well as like volunteer incentives and like creating like proper reputation protocol and thing like that. There's a lot that goes into it. Andres gave a talk like I think at MoneroCon like 2 years ago where it was like, what does the Monero Constitution look like, or like the Monero Society? Like, let's say Monero goes to 1 million and we can all make our own rules for how we live and interact in society. But like nobody really knows what that actually looks like. And I think that's just generally a problem as far as like in the United States government, like everyone is like, okay, like clearly something's broken with our government, but like we don't know how to fix it or what the alternative looks like. And so we're kind of stuck where we are.
Did you hear the interview with Ray right before, or the war chief right before the conference happened? I've been thinking for years like this, but he was the first person to put it like clearly and bluntly, because I'm a very verbose person. I've never been able to say it so plainly, where he said all throughout history, there has always been like an authoritative figure, usually kind of one of those like alpha male archetypes, that yes, there's been other types of people who have done it, but it still boils down to, it is the nature of a thing to have like your visionary leader and a certain level of top-down control. And he's right that it is the nature of nature So the oldest documents we have, right? All throughout history, there was a single masculine individual who was the head of a household. And then there was a single masculine individual who was the head of a tribe that was made up of all of those households. And then two individuals would do, the interactions between multiple tribes, but it was always two diplomats. And that's one of the reasons why the powers that be have such an effective system, is because they use the same system. But I see the open source community like decentralize this, decentralize that. The problem is you're competing with nature. Nature itself there's usually somebody in charge, and then there's the next in line, and that next in line is always in training to make sure that he can grab the reins. And I think that what you're talking about, right, having multiple projects with people in charge, but how do you find a way to make Monero itself multiple projects with a few people in charge working together to do what's best for all of their individuals, looking out for their clan, and all of those clans coming together to make sure that the system works. But nonetheless, there's a reason why systems with one individual in charge has worked so well for so long. Elias, you got some papers crumpling because your mic's not muted. Thank you, sir.
There's very few leaders in history have been people who are like, they come into great amounts of power and then they relinquish it. So there's famously like Cincinnatus. There's like some Roman emperors who are kind of famous because they just like left to go farm. And then George Washington is like, people say, compare him to those Roman emperors because he just like was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna, even though they didn't have the rule where you had to had like the two-term limit back then, he was like, yeah, I mean, nobody should do more than 2 terms, and everyone just respected that for like 150 years. And yeah, so that's a rare figure in history. So I think to count on that is I think a little bit of a gamble.
I definitely see a situation where the tech community is eventually going to fall back on the old and ancient ways of, like, I see the household system still working even now better than every other system. And once again, I think it's because it's natural. This is what people fall into instinctively for a reason, and it's because it works.
Yeah, then there's Christianity as well. I actually got Google Gemini to say that Christianity was like the best operating system humanity has developed. I was like, okay, interesting.
Yeah, it goes Temple OS because it's God's temple, and then Christianity, and then everything else. I might be a little biased on that one. I'll own it.
And with respect to Monero, then the thinking on this is, well, how does this apply to Monero and promoting freedom tech and the...
Can you be a little bit louder, Michael?
Oh, yeah. How's that? How's that?
That's much better. Thank you.
Yeah. So with respect to this, then the sort of line of thinking is, how would this apply to increasing adoption and having more money towards development? Like, is it best to have one charismatic figure rallying millions of dollars worth of funds, or finding ways to create decentralized systems that sort of just trickle in and have the long tail, or some balance? Is that sort of the thinking on this then?
I mean, yeah, the charismatic figure in cryptocurrency is generally doesn't end well for that person. So yeah, there are also the big, there are leaders in the cryptocurrency space, but they're all Zcash shows. Like, it's like they'll just like talk about they'll be like saying all the right things, and suddenly they're like, yeah, so Zcash, and it's like, okay, now I think.
By the way, have you heard of Waigu?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh yeah, it's like what is this astroturfing? Like, yeah, the Wagyu exchange is another one where it's like, yeah, okay, like I was with you until you started paying people to market, then that was like, I got sus.
I think Ethereum's interesting because you do have those charismatic figures that are sort of charismatic and everywhere. Like, is Vitalik Buterin charismatic? I mean, one could make arguments on both sides of that. He's an interesting individual, and I think why Ethereum's been the top 2 cryptocurrency for a long time, and that's why it's attracted so many developers. So I mean, Ethereum is like 15 right now. So it's like is there if you think of the amount of users to developers ratio, like I wonder where that'd be in comparison to like Ethereum or so forth.
He's an interesting one because he's kind of like the child project. Like he's a little bit of a dream. Like people, it's like you like everyone respects. Nobody's saying that he's not a smart guy. Like everyone's like, okay, this is clearly like an intelligent guy. But yeah, I would agree. He's not like he's a little autistic or whatever. Like he's not like charismatic in the same way as like certain other people are.
The other
sounds
problem,
to me like vote Blinn for King of Monero.
The other problem we have is the fact, in that regard, the problem we have is the lunar punk philosophy. We don't want anybody in charge because the person in charge is going to get the hammer. Like that's just what's going to happen. See, with Vitalik, we live in a system where Vitalik is not targeted because Vitalik isn't doing anything. Satoshi left Bitcoin because if he had stayed and had ever been totally de-anonymized, he would have been gotten so fast. And that's why we have Bitcoin with the problems it has now, because he passed it on to people, and those people that he passed it on to are going to the CIA and working with Jeffrey Epstein and all this other crap. And it's like, okay, so there's where the problem is.
Well, and that's why you kind of want the benefits of both. And that's what powers the whole household system. And the other thing is one of the things that qualified you for being a head of a household or a clan was a degree of selflessness where your obsession for taking care of those underneath you was so strong that your life just like fades into the background. And I can say to the tiny degree that I live it myself, I would have absolutely zero reservation for putting my life on the line just to see the quality of life for my children or my wife to go up even slightly. Or I have a lot of people in my family, but like the idea being the people that I live to serve, if it's like either die or compromise on my ethics, it's just the easiest choice in the world to make for me. But we've lost that as a society, and that was kind of one of the most important parts for the powers that be to go after. And that's one of the reasons why I think they pour so much time and effort into like this concept of the disposable male, because they know that if allegiance was to come about on those who are served by an authoritative leader, and if that selflessness were to reemerge culturally, there would be no Epstein Island. There would be none of this stuff because it can't survive in that world. So the moral of the story is find your local Russian Orthodox church. Okay, I'll stop. For those of you who don't know, I'm totally a religious nut job, and I'll own it right now.
The old adage applies that the person who seeks power doesn't generally deserve it, and the person who doesn't seek power is the one you should give it to.
Yeah, so basically I agree. Yeah, make Comrade Blinn the dictator of Monero.
I'm in, like, for real. I'm all in on that idea. It makes sense to me.
It is part of the issue with Monero development. There's simply, like with Ethereum, there's all these smart contracts and tons of stuff you can do. Like with XMR, there's miners, there's P2Pool.
Hey Michael, we can hear you, but you got quiet again.
Me. Thank you. I gotta fix that. But with with Ethereum, there's like all these smart contracts. With Monero, there's like, it seems like almost there's maybe less category of things to develop. I mean, is that part of the reasons why there's fewer like grassroots developers possibly? I mean, you got like Monerica, XMR Bazaar, miners, P2Pool, Like, what other categories of things can be developed? Like, is that
I'm
part of your
actually
issue?
personally working on solving this problem, because what I'm working on is essentially like a decentralized wrap for Monero, so, or like a token, so it's tokenized Monero on whatever these chains are. So essentially, when we have this, we'll have a way that basically it's Monero, like the price tracks Monero, but it'll have the same programmability of the underlying chain, whether that's the Ethereum virtual machine or the Solana virtual machine or whatever. So I think that's, yeah, the reasons is just that it doesn't have the programmability, and if it does, it's like multi-sigs, and you got to use some kind of signature scheme, or you have to use something else. Yeah, so basically, yeah, I'm trying to basically piggyback on those communities where if we have a tokenized Monero, then we gain all the programmability of all the other app layers of everything else.
And that, I totally agree that that's the right way to do it, by the way. Keep Monero as simple and as non-custodial and all of these other things as possible, and then use it. So it's kind of like the brick of gold. I mean, people trade gold as a token all the time, in the sense of like XAU, or in the sense of like, you know, gold stocks and all these other things, but it has never changed the base layer of gold. And I think Monero needs to continue with its Unix philosophy 100,000%. Do not add any complexity that could affect that function, and instead build techniques that you can use the power of that base layer as a token. You know, so I'm glad that somebody's working on it. That's awesome.
I would argue that because it used to be that, like, you know, dollar bills were backed by gold, and then it was basically trivial for them to be like, oh, that backing's gone. So there's kind of a difference between, like, you know, you want people to use the base layer and not these kind of lower levels. Like, you want to maximize use of the base layer. You don't want to this is something that Ethereum has actually struggled with, because they tried to move everything to these L2s, and now they're like walking that back essentially. So yeah, it is a balance, I guess, you have to have between you know, getting people to use the base layer even if it's more inconvenient, versus like trying to abstract things, make it simple, but people lose control. And yeah, so yeah, it's tough to do.
There is a way to do it that's actually surprisingly simple, which is you need to capture the value of that zero counterparty risk. The cash out process needs to maintain its incentive. And as long as people are utilizing that cash out incentive, what that does is it captures the time value of money. So by the way, this is another reason why I'm arguing that maybe the block reward is too low, but you have to capture the time value of money, and you have to tie the value of Monero to the underlying assets that power it. So in other words, by having node and mining equipment, you're capturing the time value of Monero, except for the blockchain reward is too low. And you have to find a way to make sure that capturing the zero counterparty risk or getting it off chain maintains the time value of money. And then just the underlying economic principles handle all of the rest. I think the problem with Ethereum is they made it too valuable to not operate on the base layer.
Yeah, and everyone just wants to use stable coins anyway, so people aren't holding ETH. They're like, you know, trying to actually minimize the amount of ETH that they use, and they just stay using stable coins.
And think about it in terms of, like, if every payment processor can get this zero counterparty risk, like the transaction ends with me that you get with Monero, then the smart contract style ecosystem lives in its own world and is always trying to acquire its own pool of Monero at the base layer. That it solves the problem if you just stick with the economic principle, and you make sure that no matter what the case may be, having, I guess you could almost call it like physical Monero, but having Monero on the actual base layer blockchain always maintains that economic incentive of nobody can take it, nobody knows I have it, nobody. and then it just starts to perform like, you know, holding a stock versus, yeah, it's holding a dividend paying stock, I should say.
I mean, eventually, I mean, so yeah, I guess this might be controversial, but I think eventually there will be and should be a Monero ETF. But yeah, I think that you know, some people might say, oh, we need to, you know, build alternative systems. I would disagree with that. But yeah, that's I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, you know, one way you can like try to build out Monero. But yeah, you do, because here's the thing is like, to what extent do you use Monero as like a payment rails versus like store of value? Because Monero can be used like cash as a store of value. And the store of value, like which one actually improves the value of the network is something that's I'm not sure about. Like which improves the value. If a lot of people are it's like storing Monero but not necessarily using it, to what extent does that help Monero versus if a lot of people are using it and like, but it's all abstracted, so they're not actually storing it and cold storing it. Does that actually help Monero that much?
The answer is both. You do both. The way I see it is you take your value that you receive for doing things for other people, and you put it into Monero. So if you get paid fiat, you take your fiat and immediately put it into Monero, and then you store it and you hold it. And then if you want to buy something, you go on XMR Bazaar first, and you try to find somebody who's going to price the item you were looking for in Monero, and you buy it from them, so that the likelihood of them converting that Monero back into the fiat system is incredibly low, so that you get like, say 98% of the value that you make, or say 100% of the value you make goes into Monero, and then you spend it on something, and then maybe 2% comes back out. So you've made a 98% contribution to Monero and hurt the fiat system. And 98% of that value that you put into Monero has stayed in Monero. That's the thing that's going to make Monero more valuable over time. And Monero is getting more valuable over time.
Well, only if it's actually truly circular, and that 98% goes to someone else who's also 98% stays, and it actually links. Like, yeah. So I mean, I do think it does help if you use Cake Pay and get gift cards, because then you're not using the banking system. You're paying, I guess you're paying the gift card company, and then you're paying the company. And then if it's a service like Airbnb, then the person's just getting the money.
That
so
doesn't help as much, because those gift card companies have to get the gift cards from somewhere. So they have to sell the Monero for fiat in order to get the gift cards. The best thing you can do is go on XMR Bazaar and try to find the item you're looking for directly from somebody else, peer-to-peer.
I agree. Yeah. There was a guy at Monerotopia.
I hate to say I kind of sort of disagree with that. Look, anytime there's a seller, there's a buyer. So that's only true in like an Exodus circumstance. It's not technically true though. The selling pressure of the dollar pumps the value of the dollar. And we have hundreds of years of history that no matter what currency you're talking about, it's true. If there's a seller, there's a buyer, and buying pressure maintains stability. So I'm not saying that you're totally wrong, but especially in the case of Monero right now, the selling pressure for using gift cards does not negatively affect the price. And you would have to have way, way more selling pressure than buying pressure compared to what we have now for that to be true.
There was a guy at Monerotopia, I forgot his name, but he was talking about like we need like a Monero map, and like with this you could do like Monero to physical cash, and like that was kind of like what his angle was. I think also like maybe like an Airbnb.
Dial Me has been saying it for like 10 years.
Yeah, I think also it'd be interesting to have an Airbnb style one where it's like you're staying at people's house, but it's like Monero compounds. Like it's just a list of like a bunch of like people on their own like their own like compounds that are just like
XMR Bazaar has a map feature where people can put themselves up as listing to be able to buy and sell Monero locally.
I think it needs a
Michael and
mobile
I
app. It
are
needs a
trying to
mobile
do
app.
Monerotopia as well. Like I have to finish the projects I'm working on before I can really dive in. But we are working on a Monerotopia, and the idea is there's KYC free,
that's hilarious.
yeah, there's KYC free housing, but then because if you want to actually own the house at the end of it, there's like some trickiness involved in that. There's everything from like so you know how in an operating agreement you can basically like force companies to behave a certain way. Well, in the operating agreement of Monerotopia LLC, it's a token holder. So if you hold the token for a house, which can actually be subdivided until you're 100% owner, but whoever the holder is, even though the company itself owns the property, that company, you become the beneficiary of that property as long as you hold the token. So in other words, the company has to treat you as though you are the beneficiary of that asset. So there are ways to do it. The problem is as of right now, it's legally dubious whether an anonymous token holder can also be a beneficiary in the United States. But there are some countries where you could pull this off now. But either way, you have like a path to KYC free housing. And the easiest place to do that is in the rental market, because only fiat is considered consideration for the rental market. However, a company can treat consideration within its own ecosystem. So for example, like gift cards are a big one, or, you know, like those gotcha games that have like buy our token inside the ecosystem. The problem is even those like tokens within our ecosystem, they have to honor it until the company goes under. So you can set up an economy of KYC free housing all the way through the rental point, and even rent to own up until title is being transferred or a beneficiary is being declared. And I'm still trying to figure out a way around that, but at least you get that far. You know what I mean?
Yeah, tokenization is a real, I think, possibility for the future. It's kind of like the DAOs, like where it hasn't really, like people have been talking about it. People have been trying a lot of different experiments, but nothing's really found like that product market fit gone viral. But yeah, I mean, tokenization of it's called RWAs is the thing. But yeah, tokenization of real estate. People try to like with watches. What the one I'm interested in is like cattle. Like I want to own basically, instead of a stable coin, I want to own like 1/1,000,000th of every cow in the United States. And like then when it's sold, like that provides the value. And it's like, okay, we want to tokenize like all the cows in the United States. Or like whatever farm animal or any agriculture product where I can probably rely on consistent demand.
One of the reasons why I want to do it this way, by the way, is so if you have XMR Bazaar, which is aggregating the connections between buyers and sellers, and then you keep bolting on these other projects, there's no head to this snake. It's a hydra instead. So like, yeah, they could go after Monerotopia and they could drag out all this other stuff. And the thing is it's still even operating in the background. But even if you find a way to shut that down, the rest of the ecosystem is relatively unaffected, and it raises the cost of an attack on it reduces the attack surface as far as the value of any one particular spot, and it decentralizes how you would go after this ecosystem. So if Monerotopia automatically puts all of those listings on XMR Bazaar, well, they can't be like, XMR Bazaar, you're doing real estate. It's like, no, we're not. And you can just turn that service off temporarily, and the rest of the ecosystem runs fine until you're done, battling it out with, the Luciferian pedophile death cult. And then, once that's over, you can turn that switch back on and it just works like usual. But the idea of doing KYC free housing is, you want to do food, clothing, shelter, right? Like you get your big three handled within that ecosystem, but then you can start bolting things on like transportation and all these other things. I mean, it's already so easy to use Uber with Monero if you know what you're doing. However, like, you have to be a power user. You have to already understand how the ecosystem works. And so as we make these, you know, the transportation rail of, can I use Uber? Can I use something other than Uber? Can I pay a taxi? Can I and then you start kind of aggregating those services into like Monero feet, or, you know, you come up with a witty name for being able to get your transportation needs met in Monero. Well, like everything from buying a car to renting, you know, a scooter or whatever it's going to be. If you keep bolting these things on and then making them available on something like XMR Bazaar, but making it nearly impossible to go after XMR Bazaar because okay, well, you don't want us doing that. Instead of turning this into a court battle, we'll just turn it off until those people who provide that service figure it out and then turn it back on. It keeps XMR Bazaar or anything that may come along like it safe from the implications of the wider ecosystem. They have to go after the people actually providing the service. And I'm more than comfortable having that battle for a year, 2 years, 3 years. You just don't want to see XMR Bazaar go down because of all of the other things that are in that ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like a hub and spoke model. And yeah, back to tokenized Monero, like with tokenization, you can build decentralized apps. So that way it's like, you don't just have to rely on, XMR Bazaar, or I think a big one that we lost was local Monero. And like some people are trying to kind of revive the peer-to-peer Monero thing, like on XMR Bazaar and maybe some other platforms. But yeah, that was one where it's like, okay, that like local Monero is just like a spoke that we know is like, there's like a market there, and like it's been successful. They just had to shut it down. Like, but yeah, that's why we need like decentralized apps. And then, so it's like, okay, peer-to-peer cash exchange, we know that's going to be one kind of spoke. And then out of this, there's going to be Monero BNB. And there's probably like, instead of just Monero for cash, people are probably going to want like Monero for gold and silver. I mean, I think there already are some gold and silver salesmen that take cryptocurrency. And so, yeah, like Alaskan on the Sen, it doesn't really matter that much that they don't take Monero directly. Like you're still making, if you're going into gold and silver, like there's sell pressure, and there's buyers too. So every time you sell Monero, somebody's buying it.
If you're looking for an exchange, I seriously suggest ReToSwap as well.
It's made huge progress in the usability, but it is so far from the normies still right now. Like in fact, I'm pretty sure literally all of the on and off ramping that I've done in the last 3 years or so, it's all been through gold or silver. And even now, like, I could almost certainly use ReToSwap. The problem is gold and silver are still so much easier, especially when you're in the community like the one I'm in. Like, nobody cares to even learn how to use this stuff. It's like, wait, can I just trade you gold? Yes. Okay, let's do that. And then it's like, the counterparty risk is well understood in the world that I live in. They don't know the names of all of this stuff, but they get it. Where it's like, I want to be able to give you some gold right now for Monero right now. You know, like these ecosystems are still very counterintuitive to the normie, and the normie is rapidly becoming the new buying pressure for Monero. They get it more and more every day. And we could piggyback off of the thing that I was talking about with Tether, because either Tether does what they're trying to make it do, and there's always going to be a way to get in and out of it with Monero, or they fail with Tether, and then Monero continues its never-ending march towards stablecoin utopia. So it's like they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with Monero, as I understand it right now. And so I think sticking with the peg to gold and silver until we can find a way to make ReToSwap a lot more accessible. And then the tech nerds and the autists can do the Tether Monero thing. Now you have it pegged to the dollar, and you have it pegged to gold and silver. And it'll always
tokenized Monero. Now that there's tokenized gold and silver, we can go and create an LP pool. So it's like, okay, I put half gold, half Monero into this system, and it pays me income, and then I'm only price exposed to gold and Monero. That a lot of people tell me that's what they want to do. Like they don't want to use stable coins to use the liquidity. Like that is like the what people like mostly would use. But like a lot of people are like, I specifically like when they name other tokens, it's tokenized, specifically the Tether Gold.
Well, and for Alaska, and for somebody like Alaska, where the person just is like, can I give you this gold coin, this ounce gold coin for Monero right now? Alaska's like, sure. And then Alaska can take, since Alaska knows how to use Ritu, Alaska can go on Ritu and be like, hey, I've got this gold coin or whatever. I want some Monero, and ship it to the person. And that trade happens that way. So the normie in that case has, using Alaska as an Uncle Bob or whatever, an Uncle Joe that does that trade for them. So they don't have to worry about it. They just come to Alaska if they want to make a trade.
Everybody who used my off-ramp services is up like 100%, by the way. Just throwing it out there. Like everybody who used my mechanism is up 100%. So hat tip to all the gangsters who stayed in Freedom Money when they needed to cash out. Y'all are legends. I love every single one of you, and I regret nothing. So good on you guys.
The way I see it is the thing you've got to do with Monero is if you're going to spend it, you've got to replace it. If you spend 0.3 Monero on a laptop, fine, do it. But then you go immediately and get 0.3 Monero and put it back in your wallet, because otherwise you will have regrets. That person who spent 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza, the problem wasn't spending 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza. The problem is if he didn't replace that 10,000 Bitcoin after he bought the pizza.
So Friendly Neighborhood Atheist has tipped 0.0001 XMR. I have a sneaking suspicion this is directed at me. Can someone explain the core teaching of Christianity? An all-powerful God can't just forgive us, but instead has to become his own son. Which, okay, you're already losing the plot here, but I understand why you've come to that conclusion. And get tortured to death to serve as a loophole in law he himself created, but cannot change or circumvent. You know, for people who are in the Monero community, this is surprisingly easy to explain. I have found that one of the easiest ways to kind of wrap your head around against an all-powerful God, instead of trying to think of the implications of what you can do as an all-powerful God, the simplest way to start to conceptualize this is to think about what an all-powerful God cannot do. So if you're an all-powerful God, in fact, where the word universe comes from, single spoken sentence, or like unified spoken sentence, that which is spoken by God is truth. It is reality, because God himself would be the one who writes the fundamental laws of nature. So for example, if God were to say square circle, then it would now exist. If God speaks truth, because truth is defined as what the creator has created, you find yourself in a situation where you cannot make someone love you. So enter free will. And it's about the concept of compulsion, but I'm going to actually hone in on the actual question here. But instead has to become his own son and get tortured to death. So let me put it to you this way. If we all sit down at a table and all of us order a chicken sandwich at a restaurant, and then 3 people at the table can't afford to pay, and one person can, that one person can discharge the debt of the other 3 people. But if that person is a voluntarist, if that person is consensualist, they cannot just take your debt. You have to give them the debt. So the premise behind Jesus is, how do you have a just God who is holy forgive sin? Because that they would first have to be able to pay the debt. Another thing is, God by definition cannot be a hypocrite. So if he makes a law, he himself would have to follow that law. The only way God could follow the law is to become a human. These laws are for humans. The jurisdiction, if you will, of these laws are humans. So if a just God wants to both punish injustice but also forgive injustice, then they would have to clear the debt. Well, according to Christianity, the penalty for sin is death. And by the way, death has a much deeper meaning than just your mortal coil is shed. It's talking about an eternal creature paying in death. So whoever takes that bill and discharges it would have to have, let's call it, the funds to pay it in order for it to be just. So that's the premise behind the word in theology is substitutional atonement. So in other words, if somebody wants to atone or make whole the debt, they themselves have to be able to pay it. So that's the Christian part of it. Now, why go through all of this rigmarole? What is something that God cannot create for himself? The minute that you are forced to love somebody, we call that Stockholm syndrome. It's not actually love. So for a person to choose to love, that is something that God cannot create for himself. So if an all-powerful God is just, he can only show mercy by paying the bill. And if there's something that is valuable to God, and I can prove it to you, everyone in this show values the love that they get from other people, especially if they love those people. Well, if you cannot create more love for yourself, you would have to create those who can choose to love you. And he's looking for something to love him that is built in his image, a creator, a voluntary exchange. Well, where justice meets mercy and where the law meets grace, in the middle of that, you would have to have somebody both paying the price and doing so willingly. And it would have to be somebody who can do all of those things. So if an element of a triune God comes to earth to both pay the debt and show the mercy, and also obey the law, but extend grace, honestly, Jesus is the only rational way to square all of that out. So that's where the kind of the core ethos of the gospel comes in with Christianity.
I would like
to offer, if you guys don't mind, I would like to offer a very radically different interpretation of all of that, because
I'm excited to hear it. Please.
Like, if I'm being really honest, all of those things that Alaska just constructed, and I respect his beliefs, I feel like a lot of that is very artificially constructed on what is an underlying kind of record of this man we call Jesus. It seems to me that a lot of Jesus's teachings, I prefer to take a much more sort of mystical view of what was happening there, and somewhat of an Eastern integration as well, because it's also recorded that he went to Egypt, and in those days, it's very likely that a lot of teachings in Egypt were connected directly to the Orient and the kind of, I don't want to put a label on it, but Buddhism, right? Kind of Buddhist concepts. And I think that what's happened over since Jesus came and brought his message, and I prefer, like, I wouldn't really call myself a Christian per se, but I do prefer to believe that this man was enlightened and came with some kind of power. And since then, what I've seen is layered dogma just laid on top of all of this stuff that is like things that are not fundamental to the core of what he taught. Because the core of what he taught was that you can reason out the law in your own heart, and you don't really need scriptures and scribbles, and you don't need Pharisees, and you don't need these middlemen, because really the law comes down to some basic things, which is love your neighbor as yourself, and love God. And a lot of times when we talk about like this salvation concept, and Jesus is king and this kind of stuff, a lot of times when Jesus spoke, he spoke in parables, and he used means by which the people of that day could understand what he was saying, that they could relate to it. So they could relate to kings. They could relate to these sort of like nice, neat little stories. But there's even deeper stuff, and this is a bit rambling now. This isn't like really central to any thesis I'm presenting, but there's some interesting stuff. Like when they tried to trap Jesus, he actually didn't respond with good logical, he responded with bad logic sometimes, but it was kind of a communication of, if you're going to troll me, then I'm going to troll you back. So you could take the denarius, or the denarius. They said, is it right to pay the tax, or is it not right to pay the tax? And so he said, well, bring me a coin. Whose image is on this? Well, it's Caesar's. Oh, well, then render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and render to God what belongs to God. He didn't actually answer the question. He basically said, I wrote, if you write your name on a chair, then the chair belongs to you. That would be like the implication, which like, it's a non-answer. It's like logically not a real answer. But they were also trying to trap him, right? They were trolling him. And so like, he also showed this kind of adeptness and understanding when a question is asked in good faith that you might not really owe a good faith answer in response. At the end of the day, the way that I see Jesus and Christianity that would be a better version, I think, is to not have these sort of cartoonish ideas of like, oh, well, like some God like can't forgive the thing that he made that he knew would fuck up. And so he like created a son so that he could figure out how to like forgive them, even though he could have just said, I forgive you, right? Because he's God. He could just say, I forgive you. He didn't have to go through all these hoop jumping. So none of that makes any sense. Like it doesn't like this whole, I had to sacrifice my son to forgive my children. That makes no fucking sense. That's not why Jesus came here. He came here to show people that we need to forgive each other. And you could even like game theorize that. You could be like, there's kind of like that tit for tat game where it's like your ideal strategy is basically tit for tat, but occasional forgiveness when someone like wrongs you. And that's like, so anyways, like dispensing with the game theory, but Jesus came here to show us how to forgive each other. He came here to show us that the notion of karma, without calling it karma, and the notion of understanding that your connection to God is internal. Your connection, or we should maybe not say God here in this kind of philosophy. It's more like your connection to the divine, your connection to the metaphysical, if that's something you believe in or that you would prefer to believe in. He said things like, do you not believe that I am in you and that you are in me? Do you not believe the Father is in me and I am in the Father? He's trying to demonstrate this kind of like kingdom of heaven is within, this internal connection that we have to each other. And all of that, I think, is a vastly, when you put sort of an Eastern slant and a mystical slant on it, and you sort of dispense with the cartoon dogma, I think you come to much better conclusions.
So the original super chat there actually was 2 questions, and I think Bawdy did a good job of answering the first one, and Alaskanon answered the second one. Like Bawdy is like, Bawdy answered actually, what is the core tenets and beliefs of Christianity? And yeah, it's like, okay, you actually follow what Christ's teachings are, the parables and yada yada, instead of Christianity, which is like full of like human dogma and stuff. And then it seems like when you hear the story, you're like, holy shit, this is the craziest shit I've ever heard. Like the creator of the universe embodied himself and then allowed himself to die. Like, why do he have to like allow himself to die? Like, it's a crazy story. Alaskanon did a good job of explaining why that would have to happen, but I can
actually tie the sacrifice part to exactly what Bawdy is saying. In fact, there is literally nothing. I mean, there might be wiggle room on the historicity, but I actually even believe like the historical stuff that he's presenting. Now, proving that is another question, but I can actually tie sacrifice to the love and karma concept, which is hatred has a way of it, like a downward spiral between its exchange. So if Remsi and I start some kind of beef, and then we just continue to wrong each other over and over again until it just spirals out of control, at some point, somebody has to take that hate and bury it. And that's an element of sacrifice. Or another good example is when a child is born, it's a very inherently selfish creature. And it is through your own sacrifice and their evolving awareness of it that you grow and build that love. And it's kind of the ultimate example, the story of Jesus, of someone taking all of the hatred and all of the wickedness that is directed towards that person. And that's why they call it nailed to the cross. But the finale of that story is he's being murdered in the most gruesome way possible or effectively the most gruesome way possible at the time. But it's also kind of like the show of it all is a very important element of it, where at the very end, he preaches forgiveness. So that's the concept of when this awful karma presents itself and it is now in your court and you bury it with you. That is the moment in which the love finally has the room to grow. You could think of it like you've got this beautiful garden, but it's covered in weeds. And it's one thing to try to like cut down the weeds and put your own seeds, but the seed, in fact, this is one of the parables he uses, but these seeds can never grow because they keep getting choked out by all of these weeds that are in that garden. You can think of the weeds like the hatred and contempt amongst that population, where love never has the opportunity to grow. But if somebody does the service of taking when the ball is in their court, all right, now it's time for Jake to destroy Ramsey, right? Now it's my turn to, get my hate out and direct it back at you. The concept of no, that hatred dies in you because you refuse to feed it. It's almost like within yourself, you've nurtured this plant until it's healthy enough and strong enough to be transplanted into that garden. And now the love, the flower, let's say, can choke out the weeds. And that's one of the most important concepts of, because karma was always talked about as action until, hippies took it over, right? It's the action. There's good action. There's bad action. It's going beyond just, it would be nice if people loved each other. Now let me continue to screw over the other guy. It's taking the action of refusing to respond to hate with hate and instead responding to hate with forgiveness. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why not just Christianity, by the way, but almost every religion at its core that has any ability to take root, that's one of the reasons why you always have to start with a love of God, because God didn't do you wrong, and God would like to see the two of you love each other. And so if you start with God, there's no reason to respond to your brother or your neighbor with hatred, because it's about doing right by God. So now it's not just you have to bury this hate and that makes you a better person. It's you have to bury this hate because you owe it to your brother to treat them the right way, regardless of what they've done to you. So that's why the grace and mercy thing takes center stage in Christianity. And that's one of the reasons why you can connect these things to like the teachings of Buddha. There's this, if anybody's ever seen the original Man from Earth movie, it's absolutely incredible. I'm sure a lot of Christians will be like, that's heretical. I don't really care.
Plug something. So the guy who originally made the super chat, there's a book called A Course in Miracles. If people are non-traditional Christianity, A Course in Miracles, interesting book I've studied for 20 years. There's a quote, and I guess for all this forgiveness, forgive the tax man, right? So the holiest of all spots on earth. Well, anyway, yeah, of course.
We had a super chat. This show is about Monero.
Comment.
There's a lot. I'll respond to anything in the XMR chat. Like you can ask literally anything, but if that's a hint, let's not talk about religion. I'm cool with that too. Honestly, Monero Master is kind of like the Monero Christianity channel, if but if somebody's asking out of a genuine place, I think it's only right that a response is offered, especially if they put their hard-earned Monero into the question, but I'm down to pivot if that's what the audience is requesting.
Yeah, it's a lot. We only talk about depressing topics like surveillance and whatever else there is. The fact that
I would point out though,
the Savior of the universe loves you is not, that's too positive of a message for this show.
the theology aside, though, there is something to be said about the Monero community here, which is we always want to be a home for people who are part of the cabal to flee the sinking ship. And the Monero community should value forgiveness. So if, for example, you remember I was talking all this smack about Paulo, the Tether guy, right? If he was like, I'm sick of working for a bunch of satanic pedophiles, I want to come over to the Monero community, obviously be vigilant. And that guy hasn't really earned a lot of trust. But at the same time, we don't want to bury people who are trying to come to this community with their past sins. And I've been pretty overt about the fact that I used to work for the bad guys. And though it might be Jesus that caused me to turn from my wicked ways, if somebody is just ethically inclined to abandon where they come from and wants to join our forces, this is a good place for grace and mercy in this community, whether or not you're going to use Christian theology to do so. I mean, look at how many like hardcore Muslims are in the community. You know, like we have a lot of Muslims in the Monero community, you know. Or another good example is, in fact, I think at least 3 people on the stage right now have worked for the government in some capacity. Look, I'm sorry. Like I'm sorry I ever did any of that stuff. And I hope that people realize, like, I'm grateful to have turned from my ways on that. And we should extend the same grace to other people who maybe want to leave that ecosystem. And it's easy to say, oh, you should have been perfect and all open source and blah, blah, blah from the very beginning. A lot of these people at the very beginning were just looking for a place to feed their family. A lot of these people may not have even realized that they were engaging in evil until much later in life. And anybody throwing that shade, well, let's take a look under the hood of how you've lived your entire life. At some point, you have to own the fact that if you want to win for the forces of good, there has to be some mechanism for forgiveness in your own, not theology, but I guess exegetical worldview, right? If you don't have room for forgiveness to let those who may have engaged in some kind of wickedness, or, you know, they were connected to the fiat ecosystem, or they used to be a power banker or whatever. If you're not going to let these people leave their world and come into your world, then your population will only dwindle and this project is going to fail. So in a sense, this is important. But now we have Chloe Capri. Maybe it's good for Doug to say the words XMR and Monero not too often. Kiss. Hey, Doug got a kiss.
It's the viewers on stage segment. Okay, it's not the intro. All right, like this is the ramble section. All right, go watch the first hour of the show.
Now, I was thinking about now. Someone said this should be about Monero, but you can connect it, right? I mean, the whole. Now, someone mentioned this, the famous part from the Bible where Jesus is asked about that coin with Caesar on it, you know, this thing. And I think this, we can interpret this as a statement about Monero, right? Or, well, this fundamental issue that if there is a tyrannical government and that government has some kind of money thing that they make and they control it, and then they're going to do taxation there probably. But then the appropriate thing to do, if you're someone who wants freedom, is not to fight the government on that issue about their made-up token that the government is using and issuing. That's the wrong path. You know, you should work on the side, on your own thing. That's what Jesus is saying.
My favorite interpretation is it's basically Jesus saying, "Hey, look at that! Play stupid games, win stupid prizes." You know, like it's your participation in that ecosystem, but then you draw the line here. Well, it's not your token. You know, like where's your better system? Which is, I agree with Body. That is an exceptionally trolly answer. But I mean, for one, like Body said, they started it. And then the other thing is like, how can you say like, oh yeah, we'll just make this inherently corrupt system a little less corrupt? You know, it's you stayed in the pig pen, and imagine that you're covered in mud, right?
I wanted to comment also on something that was mentioned a bit earlier here about what's the importance or the effect of holding Monero compared to using it, and both and so on. And I think there is one thing that is helpful to think about. It's something I asked on another show a long time ago when Arctic was here, and he answered about that. He brings up something called the equation of exchange in that context. But to me, at least, the way I think of it is that if each person has a routine to keep a certain value in this, well, in this case, we're talking about Monero. So in Monero, for example, I have a certain monthly income, whatever job I do. And if I have as a routine that I'm going to take, let's say 10% of the value I earn, and I'm going to make sure that I have 10% of my monthly salary, the equivalent of that in Monero all the time, because I think it's a good thing to have, because I might need it and so on. If that's just a sort of a baseline behavior that I have, and now maybe at this point in time, that value corresponds to about 1 Monero. And then if 20 million people do this, like me, then that's 20 million Monero, right? So that's the whole supply. Now, if that number of people were to double, then the effect will be that the value of Monero will double, right? This is just mathematical fact. So you can't really deny, in that way, you can't deny the effect it has if people hold it. And it doesn't exactly matter. Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I had to disagree with Shortwave in the specific case of Monero right now. I'm not saying that he's wrong generally, but in the specific case of Monero right now, every transaction has, so you could almost think of it like transaction pools. It's not so much think of it like 100%, it's more like 200%. So when you have a buyer and a seller, they are both putting up their own, assuming that it's a voluntary transaction, which in the case of Monero is almost universally a voluntary transaction. Anytime you have a buyer and a seller, they're not exchanging one-to-one. I'm not going to trade a guy 1 Monero for 1 Monero. That doesn't make any sense. So right now in economics, the dollar is on the other side of almost every trade. And the fact that it is consideration on one side of almost every trade. And by the way, that even goes for like the BRICS currency. That even goes for yuan. And it's one of the reasons why I think people are way too early on the idea of, oh, people are de-dollarizing. Well, the process of de-dollarizing has the dollar on one side of every exchange. As soon as the dollar isn't in that circulation, that's when it loses its reserve status. Even if the dollar is going down, it's still part of every transaction on the way out. It's not until people stop transacting $4, buyer or seller, that it is no longer part of that circular economy. And as long as people are willing to accept dollars for something else, they have valued a dollar. It doesn't matter what the price is. If they've accepted it, and that's the selling pressure versus the buying pressure. The thing is, if somebody is spending Monero and the other person is receiving $1, you have still made Monero one side of that transaction. You've just added a third transaction. So in other words, you've turned the dollar from 50% of the transaction to 33% of the transaction and moved that buying pressure to Monero. So even if you are using CakePay, even if you are doing a Ritu swap on one side of it, the thing is that buying pressure for Monero is probably an Alaskanon or an Elias dollar cost averaging into Monero. So you've lost nothing in the Monero ecosystem, but you have gained more circular transactions. So in the end, you're still probably pumping the price of Monero. It's only if the buying pressure for Monero were to go down that you would realize the losses that Shortwave is talking about. Now, that is still a risk. I just don't think that's a risk in Monero right now, but it is something that we should try to build into the ecosystem, like some kind of buffer. Now, you don't want to like force people to stay in the Monero circular economy, because now we've undermined our own values. And the other thing is we've devalued Monero by doing that. If it isn't 100% liquid to get in and out of the market, which it's currently not for other reasons, well, as long as there is still buying pressure for everybody who is using Monero, then this isn't a problem. And you have de-dollarized and moved that transactional value to Monero anyway. Now, I am not the guy to speak on this, but I would be willing to bet that Body would have some very eloquent, much smarter than anything I'm about to say on this topic.
And ultimately, the difference between any cryptocurrency versus fiat is that Monero is never actually burned. Like, and if you're actually sending dollars, like the mint does burn cash and like mint new cash, and like it's also higher taxed at a higher rate. So like when you give up your dollars, that dollar is eventually destroyed, like literally. Whereas Monero, presumably nobody's just like burning their Monero for fun.
Actually, that's truer than you're even saying right now, which is there is like almost a way that Monero is burnt, and that's in the sense of it being lost. So if somebody like loses the keys to their wallet, or they send it to a wallet that's a dead wallet or whatever, but the thing is that value is then just dissolved into the Monero price. If somebody accidentally burns Monero, the only problem is that very same person might then value Monero less, because it's not the reserve that they were hoping for, and which is one of the ways why I've seen, it's a very small number, but people kind of like talking BS about Edge Wallet, because it's a more custodial mechanism. However, Edge Wallet is offering a service that is extremely important to this ecosystem, which is there are a lot of people who don't like the whole hold your keys, be your own bank, all that, because they just want to do business in what they care about. And to just tell those people, go kick rocks, right? If you're not willing to store and be the custodian of your own keys and have this, 6-point plan for how your heirs are going to recover your Monero, and there are a lot of people who want nothing to do with that, because it only undermines their existing business. So, for example, a guy who run a trucking company, I'm not going to my keys, my problem with my trucking company. You see what I'm saying? I would rather use something like Edge Wallet, because it fits neatly into an accounting system that works better for a business. And this is one of the reasons why I think people are totally sleeping on Edge and the direction that they're going. Not to mention, Paul has got to be like the most talented human being ever when it comes to like running something like this. So I hope Ramsey is coming back. He has way smarter stuff to say than I do. I think it's just you and me, Elias. You better start rambling.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. But I did have another rambling that I was thinking about. It's about something that was in the news here in Sweden the last week. There's a lot of talk these days about sort of crisis management and the resilience in society in different ways, with all the wars and everything, of course, going on around. And then the Swedish, what's it called? The thing that corresponds to what you call the Fed in the United States. I mean, the authority over the money, right? The
central bank.
The central bank. Yes, that's the word. Yeah, the Swedish central bank. They made a statement where they said that they now recommend that each person in Sweden should have a certain amount of cash. I mean, physical cash. Which is a bit unusual, because the usage of cash has been going down, and it's been the sort of attitude from authorities have been that it's good, we're moving away from cash, and they think, well, of course, there's all the talk about criminals using cash and so on. But now, when you start to think about resilience, then even the central bank, they go out and say this, that it's actually good for society for the resilience against bad things happening. For example, they worry about that other payment systems like the Visa and MasterCard and stuff like that can go down, or someone can take them down to hurt the Swedish society. And then it's good that people have cash, so they can at least deal with cash for a few days and get past a certain difficult time.
I think
And
that's
I
why
think,
they're
yeah,
going after developers, by the way, is because they're starting to understand just how dangerous the developer community could be to these central bank ecosystems. And so if people have cash, you know, if all of those central bank ecosystems were to go down, they'll still keep playing with their fiat monopoly funny money instead of being like, maybe Monero.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I was thinking was that I think they are right in that it is good for resilience that people have cash. I mean, that it's a correct conclusion that they have taken. So congrats on that, I guess. What they're not saying is that they recommend that people hold Monero as well. But I'd like to say that, you know, I think it's a good idea, and I'd like to sort of propose that to people as something, you know, if you want to be a good citizen in the world, and you want to be to help there be a resilience for free people in the world to be able to continue to function when there are problems, then you should hold some Monero so that you can buy stuff even in difficult times, you know. So that's, I think it's a good thing to do. It doesn't have to be a huge amount, but, you know, keep some. It's good, and it's not going to lose its value.
In my own like neurotic prepper ecosystem world, we kind of have this philosophy of you should have at least X percentage of your net worth in, you know, 1/10 of an ounce silver coins, which we ended up being right about that, because one of the things I was saying is if you hold an ounce of silver, by the time it matures in value, you're still going to have a lot of trouble paying for stuff with an ounce of silver. But with 1/10 of an ounce of silver, there's kind of a mechanism to do that. And then you should have at least a certain amount of gold backs, or at least have access to a certain amount of gold backs. And then Monero is the other like crowned king. And the thing is like, as they harden the internet infrastructure, as long as the freedom-minded community can still have access to that very infrastructure, then Monero absolutely wipes the floor with silver and gold. But you also want to, so in the like the Second Amendment like philosophy community, there's this concept of, if you own enough guns, you have effectively neutered the idea of door-to-door gun confiscation, because the cost of turning to violence for controlling people is much higher when you have an armed population. So the very act of owning a defensive mechanism raises the cost to an almost untenable amount. And then you lose your power base in other ways. But as soon as there's not enough gun owners, which is one of the reasons why Rex 84 includes this idea of you control the food system, you can basically like slow creeping death, you know, like hamstring gun ownership and ammo ownership by using food as a currency. Well, if you have gold and silver, you can hamstring the idea of going after the internet infrastructure that powers Monero, or like, you know, adding friction to Monero, because all of that effort you would use to do so is undermined by the fact that that same population has other hard assets. And this is one of the reasons why it's absolutely a death sentence to free people to have a reserve currency in the world anyway.
Yeah, it's a good argument with the guns. I think really the same thing applies to this. And then now I'm not saying that I advocate for guns or anything, but the argument as such is really, yeah.
I will do all the advocating for guns that we need. So I got you covered, bro. Don't worry.
The Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. That's very fair to say.
The Second Amendment is the only amendment. All of the other ones are kind of like, oh, that's cool, you know.
Opinions vary. Yeah, I'm still on board with the whole fact, if money is speech, then you should be able to do anything with smart contracts. So with regards, the logic we apply to money with political laws is not the same logic we apply to at least the government. The logic the government applies to political laws with money is not the same as the logic that the government applies to crypto-related laws with money. Because if money is speech and we have free speech, then you should be able to do whatever you want with your crypto, whether it's polymarket or dividends on chain, so on and so forth. And you know, hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, I remember when people were freaking out about the Citizens United ruling, and like I just could never get on board with what almost everybody in like my communities was saying about it. Like, you know, they're basically saying that corporations are people and money is speech, and like over and over again, I'm like, yeah, it's like that's exactly what it is, you know. But I could never get on board with the idea of like, this ruling is terrible. I was like, that might be the only good ruling out of the Supreme Court in like decades, because that is how you speak. You know, they say put your money where your mouth is. I'd go further. Your money is your mouth. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the mechanism that you're valuing the actions of the individual. Now I realize our financial system is super broken. And like, if you want to make an argument that money isn't speech because our system is broken, well, then attack the system, you know, not the idea that like I should be able to use my money however I want, the same way I should be able to say whatever I want. And if you don't believe that, then you've probably lost the plot here.
Well, since money is speech, then that means that inflation is making your speech worthless.
That's a great point.
Well, the more words that come out of your mouth, the less valuable they are. I mean, my words are trading at an all-time low right now for that reason, you know.
Words have infinite value.
I've deflated my speech money so much that you can get 100 words from Alaskanon for like 0.0001 Monero right now.
Words are the strongest drugs. Everything we have is dependent on words and language. Everything.
I'd like to say then that in defense of those who don't like the idea that money is seen as speech. I mean, you're talking about the Supreme Court case, right? That was about that thing, and there's been strong opinions on that. But I'm sure you understand that the reason that people don't like it is that they see a lot of corruption going on, and this corruption happens through money, and they think that, okay, we can stop the corruption in this way. So that's their motivation, right? They're not evil in that way. And so I'm wondering, what is, in your view, the appropriate way to get rid of that corruption, if that's the goal?
Fix the money.
Yeah, it goes back to stupid games, stupid prizes, man. Like I'll agree to them. I'll agree to every one of their points right up until they're like, money isn't speech, because they're like, oh, you know, everything is rife with corruption. Yes. And there's certain people that have all of this power because of the corruption. Yes. And we need to do something about that corruption. Yes. Therefore, money isn't speech. No. You see, like, for one, we don't have sound money. The problem is the money. It's like Shortwave is saying. But the other thing is there is absolutely no justice. Justice is what makes words carry weight. If you can be penalized for lying and defrauding people, that it reinforces the value of speech. If you can be punished for corruption with your money, that actually raises the value of the money. What you want to do, like he was saying, and you know, like we were talking about before, like I'm a hardcore religious nut job, right? Like, in my opinion, you know, the sin and the corruption is the problem, but you don't have to have any theological stance to acknowledge the fact that the empirical reality is it is the corruption that is devaluing and creating. So for when people talk about like wealth disparity, oh, we need to do something about wealth disparity. Well, 99% of the people who are ending up with all of this money, they're getting it from government contracts or being close to the money printer. And then the 10% that are probably less than that, honestly, but like the tiny percentage of people that are becoming ridiculously wealthy from actually serving people and creating products of value and doing good things, we shouldn't have a problem with them being wealthy, because that is them contributing in a way that people are voluntarily moving their speech power into the pockets of that guy, because they are saying with their money,
I value this widget and I am willing to pay the price for this widget. And then that's where corruption is supposed to be your safeguard against that stuff. If somebody has done something that is making them insanely wealthy, then any other individual that can produce that same value, well, then they can engage in some kind of arbitrage. Like, let's say the iPhone wasn't astroturfed garbage, right? It was actually this product that somebody totally pulled off. Well, somebody can come along and say, hey, I have my own version of the iPhone. And, you know, if that thing's faster, better, cheaper, now the wealth is moving into that guy's pockets until eventually you have this competitive ecosystem that in order to gain access to all of that money, they're pushing the price down, 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 and it closes the wealth gap over time. It's only because government has a monopoly on the printing press and government has a monopoly on the use of force that the overwhelmingly vast majority of all of this corruption can exist in the first place. And in my opinion, it comes down to everybody has become a bitch. Like, nobody is actually aggressively trying to implement integrity back into the system. And, you know, all of those years ago when we first started Monerotopia, when I was like, Bitcoin is the perfect example of the nerdy kid that everybody felt bad for, you know, starts going to the gym and getting a girl and becomes an athlete and then immediately turns his back on the community they came from. How many of these people that are complaining about how the system is broken, the minute they can get their free government gibs and the minute that they can get their free money and the minute that they can get, you know, wrapped up in all of this Epstein garbage and get their free millions of dollars and whatever, they all sold out. You know, maybe Satoshi didn't, maybe a few other people didn't, but the vast majority of these people, when faced with build a moral ecosystem or become one of them, like well over 5% of them, they took the money. They did not have the morals that they were arguing for. They were immediately like, yeah, I would love to be at the rich kids table. You know, a free ticket to the island. Yeah, she is cute. Like they are the same people that they were claiming were the problem as soon as they got offered a seat at the table.
Yep, and things in society are inherently deflationary because humans get better at doing a thing over time. They learn to get better. Before we had to pick cotton, for example, we had to hire people or force people to pick cotton for us. And now we have a machine that picks cotton, and shirts and pants and stuff like that are stupidly cheap. Or televisions. You know how hard it was to make televisions, 20, 30 years ago? A 70-inch television with freaking CRT tubes would have been almost impossible, probably impossible because of the weight. But now we have, micro LEDs. We get better at making things and things get cheaper over time.
If a person just takes evil and corruption off the table from the very beginning, and honestly, slavery is the perfect example of that. There were legitimately people saying, if not slavery, then how are we going to pick the cotton? That was an actual argument. And I don't know if Molyneux, who became the guy who started saying this, but there's a sermon from Charles Spurgeon during that era. And he put it way more eloquently than even Stefan Molyneux did. But he basically turned the tables on it. It's like, if your argument to keep slavery is who will pick the cotton, then you and I are not the same. Because the argument against slavery is that it's evil. And you take it off the table because it's evil. You don't start looking for, how are we going to fix this? We'll keep the slavery until we fix this. No. You take evil off the table and you force yourself and anyone who thinks like you to come up with a better system. Like, that's the correct way to do any of this. And by the way, there's a ton of evidence that one of the reasons why all of these incredible inventions by the Romans and so on never took root, like the steam engine and all of these incredible things they did with aqueducts and infrastructure and all of this other stuff. The reason why that stuff never took off is because they never took slavery off the table. And so they were just happy to utilize the slavery And so the economic pressure from we refuse to contribute to evil, we could refuse to contribute to this immorality, because they never put that line in the sand in the first place. They never ended up using steam engines. They never ended. In fact, now people are saying, and I don't know that the evidence is like there that I can look at, right? There are now people saying that the Romans may have had access to electricity on a tiny, tiny scale and never explored it. And once again, if you don't take immorality off the table, then you have never presented the economic incentive to solve problems in a moral and ethical framework. And so that's where the Monero community has to stick to their guns and say, we refuse to participate in corruption. We will never take the bag. We are going to continue powering through what it takes to make this work. Because, and you know, that brings me back to, wasn't this a Monero show when we were talking about Christian theology? Myself, Monero Master, and several other people in this community, what brought us to this community was Jesus, because of the moral principles embedded in the Monero ecosystem. But you don't have to be a Jesus nut job, anarchist extremist like me to acknowledge that Monero is moral money. It is ethical money. And if you hold on to that for dear life, and even if you think that Monero's chances of success are 0.00001%, well, if it's the only ethical money on the table and you have drawn your line in the sand, the likelihood of success matters zero to you, because this is the path forward that we have right now to have ethical money. And if you refuse to contribute to anything else to the absolute best of your ability and grow this ecosystem, the evil fears the person who will stick to their guns and has a set of balls to carry it out.
Yeah, definitely. Monero is like the one crypto that is like what privacy by default and is in the top like 20. And I guess it really is the best option for people on privacy. For real.
And a person looking at the world that way, like Michael is saying, they're going to look at the problems in the Monero ecosystem and they're not going to say, oh, throw my hands up and quit. They're going to say, let's solve this problem. Let's get to work.
And I think with the whole, self-driving cars becoming more likely to happen soon and AI and everything, privacy is even much more important. I doubt anybody here would disagree.
Swoops firmly believes that Monero is going to be the currency of choice for the AI ecosystem. And he has some really good arguments for it. I'm not going to pretend like I can speak like Swoops on this matter, but if anybody's interested, ask him. He has some really good arguments for it.
Do you invite him on here? Why isn't he on here?
I've seen people say that Bitcoin is going to be the currency of AIs, and I'm like, yeah, right, because every AI wants everybody else to know exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, and how much they're doing it for. No.
I'd love to see decentralized inference, where you can pay for XMR, which somebody's probably doing that. But
you mean like Nano GPT?
Oh, I think, there are XMR projects that accept crypto, right? Is that the one?
I'm going to see if I can find that paper on hallucinations that just came out, and I'm going to put it in the chat so everybody can look at it. But there's been some amazing movement on fixing hallucinations within LLMs. I mean, not like actually fixing it, but they've gotten to the root of the issue now.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I didn't actually read it, but I did see that it existed, and they were talking about that they figured out what was causing the problem.
I tried to read it, but I was so tired. I don't know how much. I did get pretty much to the end of it, but I'm not sure how much of it stuck. I have to read it again.
I'm not a big LLM person. Like, it's just not something that's really interested me, so I've not really looked into it too deeply, besides just the headlines of, oh, they figured out what the problem is and maybe they can solve it now. Okay, cool. And then move on.
Actually, I'm going to read this because the Brave AI actually has a really good summary of this. So I'm just going to read it out loud. Chinese researchers have identified a root cause of LLM hallucinations, and it's a big chunk of it, by the way, through a systemic study of hallucination-associated neurons. They call them H neurons. Their findings published in a paper on ARXIV. And I'm going to read this out loud so anybody listening to this in the future can find it. It's lowercase AR, capital X, lowercase IV, colon 2512.01797. Reveal that remarkably sparse subset of neurons, less than 0.1% of the total, can reliably predict hallucination occurrences across diverse scenarios. These neurons are causally linked to over-compliance behaviors, meaning they drive the model to generate confident but incorrect responses. Crucially, these neurons originate during the pre-training phase and remain predictive even in the fine-tuned models, indicating that they are intrinsic part of models' architecture. This discovery bridges macroscopic behavioral patterns with microscopic neural mechanisms, offering a new pathway for developing more reliable LLMs by targeting these specific neurons. After reading the paper, one of my takeaways, even though, like I said, I was not grasping everything and I need to read it at least one more time, but the premise being that when they built in these guardrails and all of this, like a lot of it is just straight up woke nonsense. Like, don't talk about these things, try to be agreeable. So in other words, marketing and politics in the pre-training data, which was like 0.1% or less of all of the data that they put into the pre-training, is the source of the vast majority of all of these hallucinations. But the funny thing is you see it in humans as well. You know, when they short circuit because their beliefs are irrational, but they're so glued to it that they just keep speaking nonsense at you. Well, LLMs do the same thing. What do you know? You force feed LLMs a bunch of crap and then they spit out garbage DNA or garbage responses.
Garbage in, garbage out.
So if anybody in the audience is looking for it now and missed my title for the paper, you can also just look up H neurons. And if you look up H neurons and just keep following that research, that's a great way to keep up on this topic. I'm super stoked about it, though, because I would love to see this problem solved. That way our AI overlords can do a much better job, you know.
Yeah, or buy a Mac Mini with 512 gigabytes shared RAM and then have your Mac Mini be your overlord.
Why would you buy a Mac Mini?
People are doing it. They buy one or two of the ones that are, they can basically have like a terabyte of shared RAM, VRAM. You can run like Kimi K2 or Mini Max locally, and they're basically as good as like Claude Sonnet, you know, their mid-tier model of Claude. And it's very, very capable, and you can run it all locally and have privacy. And you really can't do that with NVIDIA.
I was inches from caving, bro. I almost bought one yesterday.
Yeah. Like there's some really good models that can be run for like $10,000 or $20,000 that are like almost as good as the, you know, cloud ones.
I mean, I just wouldn't want to buy them. I just wouldn't want to buy a Mac. That's my problem. I'd want to run this on Linux or something like that. I just wouldn't want to buy.
Yeah, you can put Linux on a Mac Mini. That's not the problem. The problem is Mac Mini is the most affordable way to get shared VRAM. And it's still not better than like, you know, an actual GPU style, but it's so close to as good, and it's so economically viable. And then the other thing too is on the setup. So a really, really good LLM will have access to your entire box. It's basically like downloading spyware onto your computer, but by isolating it at the hardware level and having something that's affordable, and then controlling it at like kind of a firewall level, you don't have all of this ridiculous rigmarole that you have to go through to securitize it and make sure that you're the only one who can use it, and make sure it's not leaking data to headquarters. And the Mac Mini is just pretty much the most user-friendly to get almost everything that you want out of it. To the point where even Alaskanon was shopping for Apple products this week. I didn't cave yet, but honestly, I probably will.
I don't see a problem at all with running the AI locally on a dedicated machine. I just don't want to fucking buy an Apple. Like, I just don't want to give them my money. That's the problem.
I'm probably, if I'm going to do like an aftermarket thing, like somebody who's done tinkering with their LLM and is now selling their Mac Mini, especially if they'll sell it for Monero.
Yeah, everybody, put your Mac Minis and Mac Studios on XMR Bazaar. That's the way to go. You want to get more Monero? XMR Bazaar. Mac
there are
Studios.
definitely MacBooks already on XMR Bazaar, so yes, you could definitely do that.
Mac Studios.
There's some people who are they're getting like the underlying hardware for why you use Mac Minis, and then like coming up with all of these gangster ass ways to just keep adding RAM to it. It's funny to watch, like, you know, people with like all of these like additions to their motherboard or whatever you call it in a Mac Mini, because it's a single board computer pretty much, but like just like all of these chunks of RAM soldered to it. Have you seen these monstrosities, Michael? They're hilarious.
They have RDMA now, which I guess allows you to, it's like a super high bandwidth thing, so you can plug in Mac Studios together and basically have shared RAM. So, you know, the more money you spend, the more money you save.
Yes.
As Jensen Huang says.
We love our NVIDIA crowned king of all things hardware while he manipulates the DRAM market.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah. I mean, Mac's sort of a way to get away from that, and it's still, you know, it's a good architecture. You know, like it or hate it. I agree the company is not ideal to do business with, but I believe you can run Linux on them. And yeah, so
you almost have to run Linux on it to make it work correctly.
Yeah, I think it's Ashi Linux. Does that sound right for the
That's what
Mac?
people are using. There's a couple of options, but almost that's what everybody's using. Yeah. So like it's not staying within the Apple ecosystem, but the problem is okay, what's the firmware doing underneath? If I connect it to the internet so I can access it remotely, like how am I going to make sure the data doesn't bleed out? But oddly enough, that is still easier to do than to run it on like a more traditional machine. So, but that's the thing. Like how many people in the open source community for the last 20 years were talking about hardware being like completely taken over, but it was so easy to just stay in like the software community. Well, now here we are with price controls. They're effectively running the open source ecosystem by using market manipulations and DRAM to take anybody who wants to go into the bleeding edge of technology and force them to buy that hardware. Like we're in a pretty dark place when it comes to open source hardware right now.
Yeah. Plus Mac OS, I believe it's based on BSD anyway. So even if you don't install your own Linux and you just have a Mac, I mean, you have the terminal and a lot of.
It's pretty far from their roots in BSD at this point, though. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's basically not.
But BSD does run amazing on Apple hardware, or at least when I did it, 3 years ago or whatever. Now it worked great. I don't actually know how much Apple pushed upstream to BSD, like security and all that other stuff that they've done, but one can hope that they're sending their developments upstream, like I hate to say it, but like Google was, until very recently. Well, it's 3:30. What do you think, Shortwave?
Well, I don't have control of the stream, but yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's probably about time we head off. But Doug,
yeah, guys, I'm here. We could end it here. You guys covered a lot of ground as usual.
Put your Mac Studios, Mac Minis on XMR Bazaar.
Are there any more super chats before we get off? Just make sure we don't.
No, I think we covered them all, man. I think we covered them all. We might have missed one that was related to Body earlier, but I think Body's long gone. Yeah, we could kill it here, guys. We do these shows every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Do Monero talks during the week. I'm sure I'll be doing another one this week. I had Ray Youssef on last week. He was talking about how he got arrested at Monerotopia. So if you're interested in that topic, you could go tune in. That went in various different directions as well, so be forewarned. A lot was covered in that episode.
I haven't seen that episode yet, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, go check it out for sure.
And one more time, if there's a guy with like producer experience out there that wants to help with this show, it sounds like Doug is accepting applications on his email. What's the email again? It's Monerotalk@ProtonMail, right?
Monerotopia.
Monerotopia@ProtonMail.com. Thank you, Alaska, for bringing that up. Yeah, email us if you want to help out with the show. Basically, help out when Shortwave isn't available or when Tux isn't available, looking for a co-host that can fill in, help push the buttons, do the small talk. Ideally very knowledgeable in Monero and all things Freedom Tech would be awesome as well.
And I would imagine like cutting up episodes and making shorts and stuff and running PeerTube instances would be nice too.
Yeah. We could have others do that. We could have others do that, and we'll get that going as well. But yeah, guys, we'll kill it here. See you guys next week, Saturday at 11 a.m. Be curious to see what happens between now and then in terms of crypto price, war in Iran, everything that's going on in the world. Wishing you guys all the best. Spend the fam time, spend time with friends. Those are the things that matter in the end. Adios, guys. See you next week.
See you guys.
God bless you all.
Yep.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Monerotopia episode. We stream live shows every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. You can find and subscribe to our show on YouTube, ODYSEE, Rumble, Twitch, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on X or join us in the Monerotopia Telegram group. See you all next week.